Welcome, everybody, to Playback. My name is Nate.
My name is Brandon.
And Brandon, we also have a guest today. Can you please tell us about our guest today?
Yes, so here to discuss this week's album, which is Room on Fire by The Strokes. I have asked the great Matty Gregg to come and be here with us. Matty is, so I'm a fan of Matty's YouTube channel, which is so Matty Gregg Music on YouTube, Matty Gregg Music on Instagram. So I and other people listening, you may be like me. If The Strokes or like Garage Rock Revival is at all in your YouTube algorithm, you may recognize this man's face. You may have been presented with his videos, among other things, you know, being a great songwriter and musician and music educator and engineer and producer from the East Coast. Matty is also known for, you know, kind of being an authority in this like sector of music, the Strokes and the adjacent bands, you know, that Garage Rock Revival thing. So what do you think, Matty? Is that a fair assessment? Is that a fair summary? Or
I think it sounds great, and I appreciate you guys bringing me onto the podcast. I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to be considered an authority on that, you know, aughts rock revival and thereafter rock, indie rock genre. And I think what draws people to the way that I talk about this area of music is I attempt to talk about it in a way that legitimizes it as good music and talks about how there is care and attention and craftsmanship in this genre of music that by some people is written off. And I think it should not be written off.
That's crazy, really. You feel like people kind of write this stuff off?
I think it's born out of the narrative that is disseminated that music used to be so much better, man. The level of musicianship had to be better. The 60s, the 70s, the classic rock, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, you know, all that kind of stuff. That I think the reason why people may overlook it or write it off is because it just came at a time where music was not considered the pinnacle of like pop cultural art. Whereas through the 60s and 70s, music was where the high art was happening. And so therefore, it was subject to like critical analysis at a pretty deep level. And just because things started to change more to the video side of things and, you know, TV and movies and internet and whatnot, by the time we get to the turn of the century, people just... the music that was coming out at the time simply had not undergone that same level of critical analysis.
You know why I probably kind of think that is like the baby boomer generation, like their music is so important to us, like culturally, partially, one, because it's great, it's really good, but two, because they basically built like an entire little like cottage industry to like pat themselves on the back about it, which, you know, it's like, it's kind of our generation of musicians. It is kind of, the onus is now on us to prop this kind of stuff up and tell people like, oh no, like this is like worthy of being in the same conversations as those prior, you know, great you know, eras of music and genres and stuff like that. Because for me, like my impression of just like diving back into this stuff this week was just like not only is this stuff really great, but it's really like the last gasp. It's like the last great hurrah, the last like Hail Mary, like for like rock as a genre. Like it's like I certainly can't point to anything since this that had such like a cohesive scene and like cohesive sound and that was as culturally relevant as this when it came out in like the rock world. Like rock is really kind of like fractured and like splintered, you know, since the advent of the internet. And this to me is like, this was as important and as, you cool of a scene with as much good music as any other time. It's just funny because I don't think it hasn't had its time in the sun to have that kind of cultural reappraisal yet, and I think it's probably overdue for that.
I would be inclined to agree. And I do think the reappraisal is beginning to happen. I mean, especially being someone who is, I think I'm a little bit younger than you guys. I'm 29. Firmly, I consider myself like a zillennial. And so I've been playing around in TikTok. I've been there. I like TikTok. TikTok was where I got my start as like an internet personality, educator person. And there definitely has been, like, since 2020, especially because that contemporaneous collision of COVID with the 2020 album of The Strokes, The New Abnormal, being one of the biggest new things to happen. And, like, again, how serendipitous and crazy that they recorded the album The New Abnormal in like 2018 with like Rick Rubin, and then they're like let it sit on a shelf for a couple of years, and then we're like, we'll schedule for release in April of 2020. It's called The New Abnormal.
Right. It was already called that before. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So everybody hopped onto that, and it does feel like over the last several years in the younger cohort of like new musicians coming up, I'm talking under 30, but particularly under 25. The Strokes are a name there. Absolutely, they are, and people are really reaching into that bucket.
Yeah, so it is coming around now. Yeah,
I believe it. And if
cool.
you buy into the whole like kind of 30-year cycle thing, like they're due. They're next up on deck to have their reappraisal.
Yeah.
So,
and considering the political current of things, rock music has and always has had an element of like progressiveness and like anger, not quite as much as punk, but a desire for like change and progressiveness that I think is kind of ripe right now.
You do a lot of content on the Strokes, so I imagine you're probably relatively, maybe it hasn't been like super long time since you've listened to this, but for me, I haven't listened to this album since it came out. Maybe in college I had kind of a moment where I really had like a Strokes moment. I went and saw them at Lollapalooza in 2013 in Chicago, and it was like honestly one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. It was so fucking fun. It was unbelievable. So I probably had kind of like a Strokes summer that summer, but what about you guys? How was your impression listening to Room on Fire this time? And did you guys kind of grow up with it, or how did you come to this album for the first time?
Guitar Hero 3. Reptilia. Awesome. What the heck is this? I just played Slow Ride by Foghat.
Yeah.
And now Reptilia. What is this? What the heck? This is amazing. It's new. It's different than everything there. Everything else on Guitar Hero 3. And that's when I first discovered them. And you kind of awesome. You throw it on the iPod because you love that song. And I wasn't quite old enough. I mean, I was in like middle school to really be someone who listened to albums. So then a couple years go by, and now I am fully addicted to crate digging, essentially. But rather than crate digging at an old record store, I'm crate digging on LimeWire.
Right.
And downloading so many bootlegs of things with the titles are wrong, the names are wrong, the album covers are wrong. And I'm obsessed with classic rock at the time because I am teaching myself guitar, and like there's just so much resources out there about that type of music that I'm like, oh man, why don't they make music like they used to? One of those people, right? I was guilty of this when I was in 9th grade. So then I find the Strokes, and I'm like, oh wait, the Strokes, they did Reptilia on Guitar Hero 3. I love that band. I love that song. Or I love that song, not that band. So then I hear Last Night, and I'm like, amazing music. It sounds like it's right out of the 70s. Once again, proving the best music was made in the 70s. They don't make music like this anymore. You listen to another one, like, okay, Automatic Stop. That's so amazing. It's got this, it's got that. Then you listen to it, You Only Live Once, and you're like, man, this is so good. This is incredible. And then you like go to YouTube and you find the music video, and then you see released in 2006, and you're like, huh? Wait, right. What? I thought these guys were a 70s band.
Oh, you
Wait,
thought
what?
they were from the 70s? Wow.
I did. I missed it because, Guitar Hero
Wow.
3 was Legends of Rock, and it was all, it was
Oh,
Guns
I
N' Roses,
see.
Creedence Clearwater Revival, Thin Lizzy, all that stuff was
Even
Ozzy
that
Osbourne.
name is straight out of the 70s. The Strokes.
Strokes,
You see
yeah.
that? Like,
Right.
Of course.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so from the
Wow.
time that I was like, how old are people when they're in sixth grade? I don't know. I remember it
Well,
based off
12.
that. Yeah, by the time I was 12 until the time I was like 15 when I was in ninth grade, I thought the Strokes, and again, I only knew the one song from them, were a band from
Yeah.
the 70s until I was just digging around on LimeWire and YouTube and getting obsessed with more and more of their songs and then being blown away by the fact, wait, 2006, 2003, 2001, these guys are from this century and they're just as good as all the other music I've been listening to from the 70s and the 60s.
Wow.
What?
That's crazy.
They quite literally ignited my passion for contemporary music and being an advocate and proponent of contemporary music at all ages, whether it was 2007 at the time up until now, it's 2025, and there's still amazing music coming out all the time.
Absolutely.
That's so great, man. I love that you're a champion for that. I really do feel that it's such a easy route to take, to go, oh, music was better before. There's just nothing but crap now. And I just really, really appreciate folks like you who are out there that are showing the work, not just contending. No, there's good music now, but like, let me show you. Let me prove it to you, and it's really cool, because I've learned, just from looking at it and from the musical concepts that you show in your videos that like, it's not just that it's also good, it's that it's good in a fresh way, in a new way. Music that people made 20 years ago and music that people are making now, it possesses like musical concepts and musical ideas that are still like cutting edge and forward thinking, and people are still coming up with ideas that nobody in the 70s was doing, and I really do feel that when you are aware that the Strokes are not from the 70s and you look at what they're doing musically with a critical eye, you really can't, you can see a difference. You could see signs that like, okay, nobody would have played that in the 70s.
And we could get into the nitty gritty of how it is reminiscent of the 70s, but you're right. Nobody was playing that in the 70s. We could get into that later.
This is the first album that we've done on our show so far that came out when I was in high school.
Nice.
So this album came out in my sophomore year. So the way that I know this music is like I was there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Every generation of people has got their, whatever their Beatlemania was, whatever their group of musicians that was just so unbearably cool, like anxiety inducing how cool they are. Like I can't even handle it. Oh my God. The Strokes were that for my time, I don't know if this is like a universal thing for musicians or not, but do you guys ever like listen to music and just get overwhelmed with this feeling of like, I wish I came up with this. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And you know that feeling?
I'm more like defeatist than you are. I'm more like, it's not I wish I came up with this, it's I'll never come up with something as cool as this. Like it's I'll never reach these heights ever. Like it's impossible.
Yeah.
I had that thought today. As I was listening to this for one more time today, I just was like, fuck these guys.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, eventually you go to, it's
how
like,
dare they?
Yeah, seriously.
These guys are fucking assholes, man. Like they're too good. They're too cool. They're too creative. They do too good of a job pulling off their idea that they came up with. Like the delivery is too. It's too much. Like, you're not allowed to be this good, to be that cool.
And on top of all of that, they all look like runway models. They all look like fucking
and they're all crazy
Fabio.
tall too.
Yeah,
man.
They're all tall.
Yeah.
See?
They're all like 6 foot, which is so funny. I was recently I do these the kind of like artist retrospectives but on my own sometimes. And recently I was just going back through Fall Out Boy, and someone had up on the Wikipedia, and like they're all like 5'5". And I'm like, and I literally have the thought, because the Strokes are always on my mind at all times. I'm like, the Strokes stole all of the height from Fall Out Boy.
Oh man,
yeah. No, they did, and that's what it was like, man. At the time, like, so their first album came out 2001. Is This It? And it just like sucked all of the cool air out of the room. You know what I mean? Like there was no. There was just the Strokes and everybody else, and because they mixed, you know, something like what I imagine it was like with the Beatles at the time, and these other artists that just take over a generation like this. This was true about the Strokes, which is that they hit the strongest both on like the bubblegum way of popularity. You know, that all the girls like them and all the boys want to be like them because they're so cool just in their image, period, which for a lot of artists, that's it and that's enough. But they also were the most prominent in terms of what they were making was truly important and like worth study, and inspired other people to up their game musically, you know? The music that they were throwing down was also better than the music that everyone else was playing. It had more artistic merit also, in addition to, you know, it was
better, but it was also so different. From my understanding, a big reason why they did pop off in terms of that bubblegum popularity is because it was such a stark contrast to the like new metal that was really happening at the time.
Thank God a band like the Strokes came along during that time period, because like the whole new metal thing. Look, I know some people really love it. I'm like I'm totally a hater. Like, I'm such a hater. I think it's like one of the dumbest low points of all music history. Like, it is like the most chauvinistic era, the most like misogynistic era.
They
of
call
music.
it angry white boy music.
It's embarrassing. Like, it just feels like something that should be popular like right now, honestly, like given the time and
I know you guys recently did Pearl Jam.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I like new metal, I think, emerges from grunge. People attempting to grunge who don't have the life experience to grunge, and so new metal happened.
You are exactly on point. You're so right. That is what it is.
The thing about new metal, though, is at the time, it was coming from a place of insecurity and self-doubt. It wasn't coming from a place of offensive-ness and aggression and like, let me go over here and attack my enemy. It was just coming from a place of like, I don't understand myself and I don't know what else to do other than to scream. You know, like that's really what.
And there's a Fight Club about it.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. 99 was a big year. We've talked about previously that there's probably enough that we could like pick a month out of the year just for our podcast just to be the 1999 year and just only do albums from 1999. We could probably do that until the end of time.
Yeah.
That much notable music came out during that time, and movies and TV and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, the new metal thing, I mean, it took the form of like lyrics where what the guy was saying and yelling was a bodily threat. Like I'll cut you, I'll fight you, I'll punch you, you know, I'll fuck you up or whatever. That is the form that it took, but you know,
it's a really impotent kind of music to me. Like
it wasn't. And when years later, when you look at it in a time capsule, I mean, understandably so. How else are you supposed to read that? Oh my God, this guy wanted to punch you. but that wasn't really what it felt like at the time. It was an empty threat. It was a child left alone at home with his parents, by his parents, with nothing to do, and he just starts screaming to nobody, I'll punch you.
And I think that relates exactly to what you were getting at in regards to how the Strokes had this like interesting like collision of multiple things, both musically and culturally, right? Like in the 90s, that I bring up Fight Club for a reason, in that, you're saying it had this child left at home like anger, right? And it's like this, we're all not sure why we're living here, like what our purpose is in society at this point. There's this nihilism, and the new metal is all the people who that search for meaning that kind of like turns into this like anger, right? That the nihilism turned into anger outwardly. That did reign for a while. But something that the Strokes did is not only did they, man, again, the complex interplay of factors there. There was the angular musical style of the new metal, that they kind of took that angularity of like, the rhythms and the guitar tones and the vocal tones and stuff as well. They took that angularity and applied it to some, vintage musical ideas and contours. But then on top of that, on top of the songs being really good and well performed, they also had that popularity, like how like a lot of times those things don't mix. But then in terms of their image of how they were so cool and they looked so awesome, the nihilism from them was not turned into anger. It was just kind of turned into sadness. I had that like undertone of
apathy,
ennui and malaise. Yeah, that went on to dominate so much of the aughts, like that like indie boy aughts and teens thing of just like, why won't you open up?
It does kind of feel like the Strokes were like such a party. It was such a good time right up until they became famous. And then it seems like it really bummed them out. It seems like the Strokes getting famous was almost like the biggest bummer for them, like as possible. Like they just seemed like that was like almost like a crushing kind of feeling. Like all of a sudden they had all this attention on them. And it really just, I get the sense that like as soon as they had all this like attention, responsibilities, as soon as they had to navigate all this bullshit beyond just like playing gigs and like having fun and partying and stuff with their friends, it was just like, it was over. Like, it doesn't seem like they had, like, I feel like, especially like making this album, it does not seem like they had like the greatest time like doing this. Like, it seemed like a huge bummer. There's all this pressure on them to like answer their first album and all this shit. And it's too bad because I don't quite understand why this was perceived as such a letdown at the time. Because to me, I'm like, why would you want it to be like diametrically different from what they just did? What they just did was like one of the best albums of all time. Why would you all of a sudden now expect them to do something, like, a 90 degrees in the other direction? Like, I don't get it.
I have my theory for that, and I'm curious what you think, Matty. But so the first album, Is This It, was and is still undeniable. But they were held in a place where they were being regarded as like, you guys fixed rock. You guys fixed rock and roll single-handedly for the entire country and for the entire world. So we're just relying on you to keep doing it. And so
I need to make more stuff so that we can keep ignoring Alien Ant Farm.
That's so
That's
good.
true. That is true,
so
though.
True. And so I think that is the pressure that they felt, understandably so. What the hell are you supposed to do with that? And in particular, Julian Casablancas, and we'll get into this because that music that they that had caused them to be regarded in that way was written singularly by him, and the next music that they were gonna release was gonna be written singularly by him. So it's on one person's shoulders, not let alone a group of people. But I think that why people were so underwhelmed by this second album, it was not because they were expecting. Essentially, what it is this it was so unexpected that what they were expecting next was for them to be unexpected. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, you guys are the rocket that we are riding out into the future of rock, so keep us going. We're anticipating that you are going to do something that is going to blow our minds and that we were not expecting, and that we will need some time to even understand where you're taking us on your second album, right? And what the second album is, in my opinion, essentially, Is This It Part 2. It's like, it's more of this same thing. And I really feel if you strip away the nostalgia and the like the emotional memory that was there of Is This It, I think that the songs on Room on Fire are even better. I think it's like it's Is This It plus one.
When you told me that's how you felt about this one, and this is me removed from listening to it for such a long time, I literally thought you were insane. I was like, there's no fucking way
it can't be better than Is This It.
Yeah. And honestly, after listening to it, for me it's way more of a toss-up, but I totally get why you feel that way. And I kind of am like,
okay.
I like can't believe how much I came away from this like loving this. Like, it really is just like it feels like the rest of Is This It, right? Like, you know, it just feels like more of it, like you said.
There's a really good quote from, I'm sure both of you guys have seen the documentary Meet Me in the Bathroom.
I watched it last night. I thought it was very interesting.
If you haven't seen it, folks out there, Meet Me in the Bathroom is a documentary that came out a few years ago. It's about, you know, the bands from New York at this time. And there's a really great quote from a member of the Strokes. I'm not good enough to pick out their voices to know which one is which, but I feel it's very telling. He said, "We had been praised as rock saviors, but all we had ever recorded was a half-hour record."
And I think more records should be half hour. I think totally 35 minutes, I'm like, this is going to be good. When I see 45 plus on an album, I'm like, oh boy, I don't know. 35, I'm like, this guy's confident.
I feel
this person's confident. I believe in them.
I completely agree with you. Like, I feel like the rock, not even the rock album, the album, when we talk about an album, we're talking about a format, right? And a format with traditions and with limitations because of vinyl LPs, right? And it's like, they are typically 30 to 40 minutes for a reason, because there's like a built-in physical limitation.
A logistical reason. Yeah.
And it's like, so we've gone like our entire lives, like kind of, you know, or even longer than that. Like, it precedes us, right? It precedes all of us, like the traditions of that format. So yeah, as soon as you start to like exceed those like traditional limitations that we're used to for like an album, especially just like the length of it, it does get really annoying. And I totally feel that, because the last couple albums we've done on this show, we've done a couple that were like, you know, fucking 90 minutes long. And it's just like, even if they're amazing, it's just like, oh my God, like it just starts to feel like a slog. It was like a breath of fresh air to see that this was only like 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is the shortest album that we've done on our show so far. But Matty, what do you think regarding, you know, the underwhelmed reception of Room on Fire?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I do appreciate that there is that kind of reanalysis in recent years.
Yes.
I've always thought, and as I like literally studied and broke down the essence of all of these songs on all of the albums, I feel that Room on Fire is Raichu to Is This It's Pikachu. Room on Fire is everything.
I barely understand
that Is This It is.
I think I understand
but
what you mean.
But it is stronger, better, harder, faster.
Yes.
But nonetheless, many, many people are going to prefer Pikachu because of the cultural impact.
Yes.
That is an amazing
That's a very good analogy. Astute AF.
Appreciate that.
That analogy might have just made my day. I don't know what is the third form of Pikachu though. I don't know what he's called. And is there a Strokes equivalent of the third form? Is there? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's a really good question. So actually, if we're gonna get nerdy,
Let's do it.
Pokemon wise about it. Raichu is the final evolution. There is a pre-evolution of Pikachu called Pichu. Right? There's little baby Pichu,
Pikachu
then
is
middle
the second?
Pikachu.
Oh.
Yeah. There's Pikachu, then Raichu.
I did not know that.
And so I think really in Strokes canon, that is Pichu is the modern age EP, which incidentally came out in 1999. Like you're saying, is
so
1999 such a landmark year.
Yeah.
And I do think for that lineage, Pikachu, Raichu, it only goes as far as Room on Fire, and then it splits into other things, because let's not even go to First Impressions of Earth, because we're going to be here all day.
Yeah.
But that is the album wherein things really start to delineate and branch off into all these different styles, and that is why I do think Room on Fire stands the test of time as just an incredibly airtight album. That to talk about the lukewarm reception that I think was disappointing at the time, is that they were damned if they did, damned if they did it.
Totally agree.
You have Is This It, which was the youthful, lightning in a bottle capture that had these undertones of craftsmanship and a gift, but really did have that kind of capturing of that lightning in a bottle that happens with a lot of young bands who don't necessarily go on to make other great albums. They just had the one. If they have that, Is This It, and they try to really depart from that and do something totally different, people are going to be disappointed. They're like, this isn't the Strokes I know and love. So Julian Casablancas, as Brandon correctly noted, he was the sole composer of it is my understanding he's the sole composer and arranger of the first 3 albums.
Yep.
Crazy.
That's right.
Even the arrangements, right? People are like, well, he wrote the chords and stuff. The other guys came in and fleshed it out. No, he said, this is your guitar part. Whoa. This is your bass part. This is your drum part.
Play the hi-hat like this, in this way, at this time.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly. And
isn't that amazing, Nate?
It is.
I'm watching Nate's mind be blown right now, just like mine was.
Well, because I knew I'd heard and I knew that he had written everything. I did not know he was arranged everything. And I guess I knew we were going to talk about this. And my question for both of you, if you even know, is like what form did that take? Like practically, like is he telling them to play? Like, does he? Because he doesn't play in the band, right? He doesn't play any instrument in the band. So does he have a guitar?
If I may, I have all these answers.
Let's go.
And I also want to just quickly finish making the point I was making before that.
Yeah, please do.
After following up Is This It, all this pressure that was already talked about. Again, damned if you do, damned if you do. Am I going to depart and make something new? Nah, everyone would be disappointing. The route that Julian Casablancas chose was to double down on this thing that he was good at, but just make it highly, highly refined, right? And distilled into a beautiful essence that, and that's why I agree with you. Room on Fire, the songs I think are better, the performances are better, the arrangements are better, the whole album front to back is more airtight. And I think that reason why that is should surprise me that it had such lukewarm reception at the time is because that is this young man coming off of an album that was, lightning in a bottle, to prove I have the craftsmanship, I have the skills. It wasn't a flash in the pan. It wasn't a fluke.
Right.
I'm a legitimate, artist and craftsman with my music.
Yeah, it's surprising because it seems like they were under so much pressure and they were aware of all the expectations on them to deliver something worthy of a follow-up to their first album. And it when you watch interviews with them from that time period, they seem really down on themselves about it. They seem very inconfident, but listening to this record, it's just all gas. It's full, no, this is exactly what the Strokes are. We know who we are. We know what we're supposed to do. And it's all the better for it. The album is better because of how confident the album sounds. I don't know how they were actually feeling. It seems like they weren't very confident about this, but it doesn't sound that way. It's not reflected in the record to me at all.
It's something that I noticed when I watched that documentary, Meet Me in the Bathroom, because it follows, it's full of video footage and conversations with the bands from the same scene, from the same city in these early 2000s, right? Yeah, Yeah, Yeahs, LCD Sound System, Interpol, The Strokes, and some others. It stood out to me that like each one of these bands actually sounds very unique from one another. TV on the radio, stuff like that.
And yet there is like a cohesive whole to them as a genre.
Absolutely.
I hear it. Yeah. I think there's something there.
But it struck me that maybe the way in which they are the most cohesive is in terms of like where they're like who their artistic identity, their ethos, their philosophy, their approach, and like what their purpose with music is for, what it is that they're doing with music seemed to me to be the way in which they were the most cohesive as a group. And something that you mentioned where it's like you see them in interviews and in between performances, and they seem so freaking insecure.
Yeah,
but then you listen to Room on Fire, what they made when they were feeling so insecure, and it's like there's not a trace of it. These are strummed and sang and pounded by confident individuals who believe in the notes that they're performing, right? And I think one of the commonalities that I could see through all those bands in that documentary was that these were all people who felt very unsure as people in life, but they didn't, all of that disappeared when they were playing.
Yeah.
It all went away as soon as 1, 2, 3, 4 start playing, like the insecurity is gone.
It's true.
And that is like what brought them to their band, what brought them to playing music and what kept them doing it again the next day, And so, maybe that's what it was like for them when they were performing this, There's just people who were kind of unsure about themselves, but as soon as you press record, there's nowhere else I'm going other than into this song,
I think it's my understanding that they never wanted to get as big as they even did. It's funny, and even as big as influential as they became and are known as now, despite that, they at the time, like from 2001 to 2005, when their heyday was, they consciously made decisions to make themselves less popular. They said no to certain TV spots, certain opportunities. And then even with the third album, First Impressions of Earth, they actually, like Julian, has basically alluded to the fact that he was trying to do something more alternative to get out of the public eye as much as possible. And I think it stems from their intentionality of what they always wanted for the band. Like you're saying, like it seems like getting big was the biggest bummer for them. And I think it probably was, because they've got on record saying that their biggest like influences in terms of like the lifestyle they wanted to live in regards to music and rock and roll was guided by Voices, which was a band that they really looked up to. They loved their sound. And they also really loved the fact that they were just a bunch of people hanging out, making pretty good music, and they released an album every year and played shows and had fun, and they had enough money to live, but didn't have to worry too much, not too much pressure. That's what they wanted. That's what they were going for. But then it turns out that culturally at the time, like Batman, he wasn't the one that they needed, the one that they deserved or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like they weren't trying to get big, but they caught on because culturally that's what we needed at the time.
Right.
And it's interesting to me too, because that is one of the ways in which this garage rock revival, as that era is referred to so often, one of the ways in which it's very different from the original garage rock era, right? So, the original 60s garage rock scene wasn't actually a scene. It was actually very regional, bands. It was called garage rock because during that time in the 60s, it was really popular for teenagers and young people to make a band in their garage and start, putting out records that their local a radio station DJ would finance and play on the radio and everything. And basically none of the bands from that era ever got any nationwide or hit or anything that went into like the monoculture that was beyond a one-hit wonder.
Right, it was like the Trash Man, and like the Sonics, like, like people we know now, but like at the time, like everyone was totally asleep on.
Totally iconic songs, like "Hang On, Sloopy." Everybody knows that song. Do you know who it's by?
Nope, I don't know
the McCoys,
song.
who are from Indiana. Okay, "Wooly Bully."
Yeah, yep.
Everybody knows that song. Do you know who that's by? It's by Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, who are from Dallas. 96 Tears.
I love 96 Tears.
Do you know who that's by?
Oh, you're quizzing me. I love that album too. It's like the whole album's good. I don't remember though.
It's by
Question
Mark
and the Mysteriums or whatever.
Yes, very good. All right.
I said Question Man and the Mysteriums.
Question Mark and the Mysteriums, who are from Saginaw, Michigan.
Yeah.
My point is that so if that label that we put on them, Garage Rock Revival, if that is apt, if that is true to like their intentions and what they were trying to do, the people who they were emulating never had anything bigger than a single nationwide hit, and they were successful in their local, region of the country. And so them blowing up, becoming big worldwide, and having even more than one hit. And the Strokes ended up having 10, right?
Yeah.
Like a band that the world is consistently interested in. But it was something that was unprecedented from the people that we say that they were taking inspiration from.
Also, just the irony of calling this particular scene the Garage Rock Revival when certainly none of them had access to a garage.
I was going to say that. If you didn't say it, I was going to say exactly that.
Like, so there aren't garages in New York. Like, that nobody had one.
I do like that. I do still think that the Garage Rock label is apropos, as it was this scrappy, underdogged nature of the music. Just a bunch of kids trying. You know what I mean? You're basically in a garage, except in this case, you're in a studio apartment in New York.
Yeah, so we're, Nate and I, listeners of the show will know, Nate and I are Californian to a fault. So you've got, Matty, you've got the insight on the New York scene. Not only what it's like to be from there, to grow up in that musical tradition, which is quite a bit different than what it's like to grow up as a musician in California, and just the realities of living there, being a musician, gigging there. So like what sorts of things do you see in the Strokes that are like uniquely New York? And you know what I mean? Like is there any kind of insight to that is important for people who aren't from New York to understand about this?
Absolutely. I mean, I do want to set the record straight just so people understand. I grew up in upstate New York, and then I did live in Manhattan and Brooklyn for 8 years. And so I think I have a pretty good amount of experience there. 8 years is pretty good. The biggest thing, and I can especially speak to this because I also read the book. You mentioned the Meet Me in the Bathroom documentary, and it is a good documentary. I definitely recommend people check it out. There's also a book.
I've heard the book is a lot better.
The book came first. Yeah, the book came first. It was Meet Me in the Bathroom by Lizzie Goodman, and it's just like this fascinating series of tableaus and storytelling of what the subtitle of the book is "The Rebirth in Rock and Roll in New York City." At the turn of the century. There's some the couple of dates there, and it's funny having read the book when I was living in New York from 2014 onwards, and the book starts at the turn of the century, is 99 to 2000 and onwards. There's a lot different nowadays from reading the book. But the thing that remains the same, to answer your question, Brandon, what about them is so New Yorkian, is, funny enough, an iconic lyric that Julian Casablancas puts in the song The Modern Age. It's work hard, but say it's easy. It's you're gonna try really hard to be the coolest guys with the best songs, but seem like you give the least amount of shits.
Whoa.
That is exactly them to a T, too, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is exactly how they are, who they are. Like, seem effortless, but truly in the studio, in the rehearsal space, it is blood, sweat, and tears. They are agonizing over how to make these songs.
And that is why I think they kind of stand above the rest, is they definitely worked the hardest, actually. There were a lot of people in the scene around the turn of the century, and then still people that I saw when I was running around that scene trying to make it as a musician in multiple bands and as a solo songwriter, yada, 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 is you do see people who are in it for the party and the fun, but you could tell they don't put in the work.
Right.
And definitely, like, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs put in work. I don't think the Yeah Yeah Yeahs or Interpol put in as much work as the Strokes did, honestly. And that actually, it's funny that, when we talk about reception, I do know that for years it was like a meme that Pitchfork, for better or for worse, gave Room on Fire back in 2003 like a really poor score, like a 6 or something like that. And then like in like 2019 or something, they like reappraised it and they raised it up to a 9.1. And they're like, yeah, we were wrong. Once you strip it all out there, it's clear that the Strokes weren't, the saviors of anything. They were just a really goddamn hard-working rock band.
Yeah, it's funny. And it's like, yeah, thanks for nothing, by the way. You're like probably part of the reason why they like stumbled out the gate. And now 20 years later, it's like, yeah, thanks a bunch for your fucking review, I guess. But
that's cool to get that insight on that lyric though from you, because that one line, just like any other line, would have just passed me by without me even being able to detect that there's anything particularly insightful or special about that.
I'm curious if we're still kind of talking about the scene. It's like we're talking about this garage rock revival scene, and I was thinking about this a lot while I was watching the documentary last night, which was just, so they're all in this scene together. Like, can we identify what are the musical characteristics, hallmarks of that scene that make this scene like a cohesive kind of thing? Like to me, the similarities I found most interesting was like Interpol was another band that documentary like focuses on really heavily, and to me they kind of just seemed like the way they played seemed very much like the Strokes to me, like the choices of notes, the style, like it really seemed like they almost felt like a Strokes knockoff band, except for the fact that they are like an inversion of like the energy level of the Strokes. Like they were way like down tempo and like mellow, whereas the Strokes were like a party. And that was like the two bands I saw the most similarities, ironically. But like the rest of the bands, it's a little more like nebulous. Like the Yeah Yeahs kind of feel like a world of their own. Like the Moldy Peaches get thrown in there, and I think even they were like in like the anti-folk scene or whatever. I don't even consider them. They may have been friends with all these guys, but I just don't consider like musically it doesn't reflect. I don't hear Moldy Peaches anywhere else other than in that band.
Yeah, what is the musical commonality? Because it's not super evident to me. It's not obvious to me.
It's called the garage rock revival because I think a lot of the vocabulary of harmonic choices, so chord progressions and whatnot, as well as the scales we're using. So you're seeing a lot of pentatonics, as opposed to new metal and stuff loves to draw on some of the more angular
like Phrygian
intervals and whatnot.
thing.
Tritones using halftones, and getting into some of that stuff. So it uses the more vintage rock and roll 70s-esque vocabulary to chords and scales and notes. However, and tones of when you, from a production sense, the guitar tones, the vocal tones, the drum tones are more kind of going towards that vintage thing rather than having that huge Butch Vig in your face thing.
Right. No one is using the Mesa Boogie triple rectifier, the new metal machine. No one is using a 7-string Ibanez guitar. Right. Yeah. They're using different equipment entirely.
We're not tuning to drop C for this song.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So then I'm saying, wait, the tones are vintage, the musical vocabulary is vintage, then how does it differentiate itself from the vintage stuff? And I think it's in the angularity of the rhythms.
Yes.
Is really the big thing musically.
Yes.
I mean, we can talk about lyrics if we want, but let's not. Let's just talk about music.
Yeah.
It's the rhythms,
Yes.
I think, and the approaches to the way that some of these people were, like physically playing those instruments.
It is. That is the hallmark of the sounds of, especially the Strokes, who are, I don't know, the forebearers, the leaders of this thing. But it really is the fact that, like, you put on this record, and not only can you just articulate every single member, but every single member is basically playing a different rhythm, a different, and they're all kind of like interlocking in this way that is just really satisfying. Like, it all forms kind of this wall of just like danceability. But like, if you really listen in on like any given song, it's like really fascinating. And it just seems like that was just the style, especially in particularly the Strokes, but like the other bands were kind of doing this too, where it's like every single member of the band at the same time are all doing these like different arpeggiations at the same time, or like different, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain without just like listening to it, but like that was like kind of my biggest takeaway is just like, it's crazy how these guys are all just playing completely different things, but together it like kind of forms this really cool cohesive sound. Like,
it's like Trout Mask Replica, except everyone is playing in the same tempo and in the same key.
right.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, that to draw the comparison and contrastion. Is that a word? Comparison and contrastion? Compare and contrast.
Yeah.
Strokes and Interpol. It's interesting that, when you get down to it, again, their approach to their instruments, their voicings of certain, like when you've chosen a chord, or a loop, or a progression, something like that, their choice of voicings and rhythms would be similar. However, structure is where they really end up differentiating, and it's very interesting because, like, I think that the Strokes seem like the cool kids, and the Interpol are like the band geeks in comparison. But that, I think, is actually, kind of contrasted to the fact that when you get down to the compositional level, the Strokes are drawing more on tonalistic musical vocabularies and tendencies. That's what I was looking for. Tonalistic musical tendencies, where they have these chord progressions revolving in and around a tonal center and like being solidly in key areas, and then even having a couple of like kind of pseudo modulations in some of their stuff. It is more akin to something, there's a little bit more schooling into that, whereas Interpol is very modal, very modalistic, and there's more ambiguous, like a soup of rhythms and tones that kind of make this interesting vibe together. And they're both totally valid ways of approaching. I mean, that's part of the reason why we have so much awesome music around here, is because there's not just one good way to do something, and there's not one way that everyone in the scene is doing something. But I do think it's funny, honestly, that the Strokes, who seem like the cool kids, are having the songs that are more written from like a schooled, highbrow perspective, and Interpol, who seem like the nerds, they're the ones who are more kind of just vibing and jamming compositionally.
That's so funny.
That's such a good
really
point.
Interesting.
It's such a good point. Yeah, Julian, when you like learn how to play the songs from these first two Strokes albums, and you look at what it is that you're playing, you can really tell, like, Julian Casablancas, like, somebody made a decision of what key this is in. You know, this is not Jackson Pollock like music at all. You know, this is not an impressionistic kind of wash of tones and sonic shapes like a lot of really, really great and really good music is. That's just something that I love so much in music. I love music that is like a capturing of a dichotomy, because, you know, the Strokes and this whole scene and their whole aesthetic and the way that they're presented, their identity, their artistic identity, comes across like, you know, it possesses like the old school rock star sloppiness, or like what you would imagine that, like, at a punk show, they're like falling around the stage, they're smashing their guitars, they do drugs and alcohol, their faces are all greasy and they have pimples, and they haven't had haircuts in way too long, and their amps are too loud, and they're just like yelling into falling around on the microphone stand like they don't care.
They're Iggy Pop.
Right. But the music does not at all match that state. At all. The music that they're playing on these first two albums is among the most, like, manicured and, like, particular and, like, intentional that, like, anybody was playing anywhere at this time.
It is amazing that, like, for how complex the music is and how much effort and intentionality is going into performing it and making it, it gives off the vibe of, like, Lust for Life, like Iggy Pop. Like,
right.
That's what it feels like.
That's
and
the
yet
feeling. Yes.
That is, like, musically, it's like the opposite of that, even though like they would be perfect bedfellows, like, on a playlist, like Lust for Life and that, like, kind of Berlin era Iggy stuff with this shit. And it is really bizarre, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, I really like that you bring up Iggy Pop, by the way, because when you look at what the Strokes have said are their biggest influences, they say The Velvet Underground, Guided by Voices, then they say Misfits.
Whoa.
And I think there's, like, this spectrum where you definitely, you kind of have, I just said them, Velvet Underground over here, and then you have Misfits over here, and I think Iggy Pop and the Stooges are right in the middle there. And I think it's funny that, you know, people are always drawing these comparisons from the garage rock revival of 2000 all the way back to the garage rock scene of, you know, the 60s and 70s. But as kind of evidenced by this conversation we're having, a lot of the music vocabulary has a lineage and a heritage in some of the punk hardcore stuff. And people really don't want to talk about that, in my experience. Like, every time I've said, like, oh yeah, no, when you get down to it, like Misfits, Refused, Fugazi, there's some of that in the DNA of the Strokes. And I think that's one of their little secret sauces that people don't even think about, because it's not really culturally talked about.
That's fascinating. Because, like, now I'm sitting here thinking, because we just did an episode on the Misfits a month ago or whatever, but, like, I'm sitting here, like, just, like, going through the Rolodex of Misfits songs in my brain, and I'm like, yeah, kinda, actually, though. Like, I get it. I totally get it.
And even
kind of amazing.
Real, you know, kind of, even just thinking about it for 15 seconds, I can see that there's also the commonality of that. It's a band's music that is written by a single individual, comes from one guy's brain who wrote what everyone else is playing. And it's all this great melodic stuff being played on these instruments that is revolving around a single melody heavy crooning vocal performance. You know, it's melody supporting melody and sort of this, I don't know if it's actual counterpoint, but essentially what that function of counterpoint is, like, you know, to those of us who barely understand it, basically two melodies that aren't the same that are playing with each other simultaneously.
That reminds me, earlier we were talking, and I had asked, you guys mentioned that Julian actually arranged and wrote all the
He
parts
just
essentially,
wrote
right?
all the shit.
Okay,
One guy. Yep.
So I guess my question was, if this makes sense, and we didn't get to it a while ago when we were talking, but it was basically like, what form does that take as someone who is just the vocalist in the band? Like, because he doesn't perform an instrument in the band, right? Like, he's not. Does he have a guitar at rehearsal? Like, does he have a piano nearby? They don't play piano on the record either. Like, so like, how did he do that? Did he sing parts? Like, what is it? How did he do that? Do you guys even know? Like, to me, that's like an
I bet
insane.
Matty knows.
There's an amount of speculation when you put together the information from the resources that we do have, but we do know that Julian Casablancas plays instruments. He plays piano, he plays guitar, he plays bass. I don't believe he's a drummer, although I have seen like a picture of him behind a drum kit. So, but who's in a rock band that can't just like play
totally.
Anyway,
Yeah.
and there you combine that fact with the fact that we know that he actually did. He went to some school in like Westchester for like 2 semesters of college, never graduated. But according to his own words, it was like, yeah, music and music theory were the only classes I gave a shit about, actually.
Wow.
Like, he's studied an amount of theory. And I mean, I did music in my college experience. I went for music technology and sound engineering, but I had to take music theory as a part of that. And I don't believe that the curriculum of music theory, 1, 2, 3, 4, as a collegiate institution would do it, has changed much in 100 years, honestly. Maybe sometimes you get a more, contemporary institution adding some jazz and blues to it, but for the most part, it's rooted.
I remember a friend of mine went to USC, and I was blown away. They have a class on the Beatles. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wild. So cool. That was so long ago. Anyway, but if you know what you learn in music theory 1, you learn triads, inversions, and counterpoint. Usually specifically just like first species and second species counterpoint, not a lot of stuff. Sorry. You do end up learning like up to SATB 4-part style counterpoint writing, which is SATB is a soprano, alto, tenor, bass. 4 parts where you have to, take a 3-note triad, sometimes a 4-note chord, like a 7th chord or something else, and you take each note and you say, well, easy peasy. There's 3 notes. I got 4 parts. I'm gonna put one of those on. This part go to that one. That part go to that one. That note go to that part, and we're going to create textures and chords from a choir where we just have 4 different parts. And you learn how to take chord progressions and arrange that for this format. So he at least went that far. And then that there's also anecdotes of, I think it was Nick Valenci in the band, who said, yeah, Julian is literally always in the corner composing, whether he's got a Casio keyboard or an acoustic guitar. Like, you can be at a party and he's just in the corner, just playing and composing something, not even talking to anybody, right? And so there's that meticulousness of like, okay, am I gonna play the rhythm like da 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 da, or am I gonna play like da da da, right? That meticulousness is there, like as corroborated by the anecdotes we have from the members of the band. Okay, so that is the presumption, is that he would just truly compose everything either on a keyboard and be like, okay, I want to take this chord that I'm playing on the keyboard like this and take these exact notes as they are and then give them to different members of the band, right? Or perhaps he is just taking a guitar and be like, yeah, one guitar will do this and the other guitar will do that. Wow. He is able to play. He's able to do that. And to tie this back to something that you said, Brandon, regarding the Misfits, not the Misfits. Sorry, there's no Misfits. That's it's like all of these instruments kind of surrounding and supporting a singular crooning voice of a melody. I would say Julian Casablancas basically took that, but he changed it. Rather than supporting one melody and one voice, instead the aim is to support one vision for the song, right? They are a song first band, for sure. Like, it's just like we have the whole composition, and we're just trying to deliver that best we can.
It's amazing hearing you break it down because, Brandon, I don't know if you were thinking this while he was kind of explaining this, but like it is remarkably similar sounding to the way we think or the story goes of how Beefheart, Captain Beefheart, taught his band how to play.
I was
Drum
not
Mask.
expecting this many similarities to come up between
No.
Julian Casablancas and Captain Beefheart at all, but they're just revealing themselves. Yeah, right, exactly. A single man sits down at a piano and comes up with the parts that his band shall play.
Yep.
And passes them out, and away we
Not
go.
even like down to the rhythms, like play dot 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 dot, right?
Yeah.
And then that's your guitar part. And then on the piano, the hi-hat should go like this, ba da 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 da, right? Like presumably he could have, like it's very, very interesting way to. It's just like, to me, it's like so foreign from my experience as a musician in bands. It's way more collaborative, I guess, and not to say that that's better or worse or whatever. I actually would be fascinated to be involved in a project that was more akin to something like this, where you have some guy who's just like, no, it's all in my brain. Like, shut the fuck up. Wait for me to tell you the part, please. Like, that's
you have to be the person who is the person who says, shut up and let me tell you what to do. They have to be so incredible as to convince the other people's egos to shut up and say, okay, if you say so.
But
it
seems like he did, though, right? It seems like he did.
Every time he's right. Like, each and every time that we've put what he's created to the test, it has turned out, no, that was fucking perfect.
Yeah.
Again.
Undeniable.
Yeah.
There's an undeniability there. And I know people do like to talk about, their pedigree, like they were all, like rich boarding school kids.
Sure.
And like the thing is like, you can get into the discussions of like, okay, because they didn't have to pay for rent or this or that, they could focus on their music. That element is there, that argument is there. But at the same time, if you're writing hard to explain and is this it and last night, it's just like, pedigree be damned.
Yeah.
These
pedigree
fucking
won't
songs.
help you there.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's true.
It'll give you the free time, but once you're there sitting at your Casio keyboard,
if you suck,
it's not holding your hand past that point.
If you suck, you're just a guy that sucks with free time and money. But I mean, you still have to be good, right? Like I don't know.
And it could come down to the the quality of instruction maybe that he received when he was at music school. That's a resource that not everyone has available to them. But because from what you said, it sounded like essentially what Julian Casablancas is doing is just the Strokes' music is him applying the concepts that are taught in the first couple music classes that anyone can take,
Yeah, exactly. And you said this at the very top of the podcast, that like sometimes you hear music and you're like, I wish I wrote that. I wish I could have done that, right? And when you talk about the Strokes, it's just like, what did Julian Casablancas do? I mean, yes, quality of instruction is an important thing, but and you get a lot of people. I mean, I also teach music lessons, and a lot of time I get people asking me the question, who's the guy who taught Julian Casablancas? I want to learn from him. And it's just like, it's not the information. It's not who gives you the information and what information you have. It's what do you do with that information? And so when you say something that's kind of a bold claim, like it kind of feels like the Strokes is at least the first album and partially the second. We can get into the nuances of the difference if you want. Part of that first Strokes album is kind of just this kid taking the learnings of like SATB-style part writing for Music Theory 1 in college and just taking that and applying it to a rock band.
That's so cool.
That is so interesting.
Why didn't I do that? Like anybody could have come up with that idea.
So
anybody
obvious.
could have done that.
Yeah. Like they give you the blueprint of how to compose something like that in those classes. I remember taking those same classes. It's you do. I remember some of the things I had to write for like I'm forgetting exactly what the exact music piece was called, but it was just like you do wind up writing these things where it's just like it is very angular, like you're describing. It's just like these very angular, like it's like this part is playing like kind of a bunch of 16th notes, and this part is an eighth note part, and this part is like the lower thing might just be like a bunch of more whole notes or half notes or whatever. And it is, when you really think about it, that is kind of exactly what they're doing. It's way cooler than that. But the theory, the underlying theory, that is it. Like that's kind of amazing. I never thought about it that way.
I like what you pointed out too, Matty, which is that this information is very old. All of that musical knowledge and all these musical concepts, this by far predates the setup of a drum kit and electric guitars and bass. So it's not just like, man, why didn't I think of that? It's like, why didn't any of us think of that for all of those years that the setup of a rock band existed? You know, it's amazing.
It's like, it's like writing for like a classical quartet, but you transpose all the parts to guitar, bass, drums.
And I think that's something else that's really interesting about it, is there is an element of like masculinity and balls to it in a way that, and I think maybe this is the part where I'm going to actually like play a little bit, in that, you know, a lot of times, and this is kind of in the DNA of the scene at the time, as compared to the garage scene, you know, in the mid 20th century, is, you know, there's this machismo as a musician, as a guitar player. You want to play big full chords, right? I want to play all 6 of these strings. I got 6 of them. I want to play all of them. I want to do this and I want to do that. And you do see that, like, when you go back to the older garage rock stuff, it's like you may have one guy, you do have 2 guitars in those bands, but you have one doing this, just holding it out, and then you have another guy playing the exact same chord, but in a different, you know, place on the neck, and maybe doing a different rhythm. But they're playing all these chords, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different notes, just with these 2 guitars playing all at the same time. And that makes you feel cool. It makes you feel like you got big kahunas. You're playing, I got 6 strings, I want to play them all. Right, it's bigger, it's better. So I would say that's not real confidence and real balls. The real balls is saying, I don't need that. I'll have one guy play this, and I'll have another guy just play. Like, isn't that wimpy? Isn't that like kind of girly or something? Like, nah, dude, it is so ballsy to be like, I need one note. You got 6 strings there. I only need you to play 1 note. I only need you to play 2 notes. Bassist, you're still doing your thing. 1 note. But you know what I mean?
That's amazing, because you end up, you get 2 guitars and a bass, so you have a total of 16 strings, and across all of that, you're playing 4 notes. You with 3 of the guitars, you're playing less than what one of them is capable of playing.
And yet it fills out the sound so much more, right? I mean,
it has the counterintuitive effect. You would think it ends up sounding smaller, but it actually ends up sounding larger.
And it becomes pure like ear candy too. It is like, because your brain gets to latch on to all these different rhythms and tones, and it's like it's just like a feast for the mind. Like every single part on every single song is just like so satisfying.
How much of that would you say, Matty, is like just an objective property of that phenomenon? Like, even if all bands played that way, it would still have that effect? And how much of it would you say that it only feels that way in contrast because all other bands are doing the other thing? And so the time that one band doesn't, it feels much bigger.
I mean, I think that is a really, really, really phenomenal question. And I think that the answer is both. The answer is, like, again, like the contrast culturally is huge of like every other band. And the thing is, people who aren't musicians, they're not thinking of it like that guy's playing 1 song, or sorry, that guy's playing 1 note instead of all of his strings. You know what I mean? Like there's just confidence in playing so minimally. They're not thinking that. They're just going, why does this sound so different than all the other bands that are on the radio right now? I don't know. I don't care. I have no qualitative assessment of like how good or of a guitarist or how badass you are because they're playing a certain amount of the guitar versus not playing another amount of the guitar. They don't care. They just care what it sounds like. And to them, it sounds different and it sounds good. And that's the second and part of my answer to the question of why the answer is both contrast and not, because the underlying compositions and part writing is just so good, right? I mean, for hundreds of years, looking back at music history, like Mozart and Bach and Handel and Beethoven and all these guys, right? Like they all composed in the same way. They either composed for choirs with 4 parts, sometimes going up to 8, not always, or they composed for a 52-piece orchestra, or they composed for keyboard, whether it was a harpsichord at the time or an organ or a piano. And they weren't necessarily drawing these comparisons. Like they were simply concerned with how good are these parts, right? It's interesting that we have now instruments that can play so many different strings at once and play all these different notes, and we have this like weird application of like a qualitative assessment of it based off of how many of those strings they're using, when that wasn't even a consideration. If you're first chair violin in an orchestra, you're only playing one note at a time because that's all you can do. And so what matters is what is the composition, right? What is the note that you're playing? And so the thing about the Strokes is, yes, it was contrasted texturally, with all these stuff, but the parts are there. You know what I mean? Like like when you put it on, if you put it on if you transcribed it to sheet music, you're like, that's it. That's the part. You know what I mean? It's good. You could put it on a violin, you could put it on a string quartet, you could put it on a choir, and the parts are still good. It doesn't matter that it's delivered by a guitar.
Makes me so curious to like I don't know if you guys remember, God, years ago there was those like CDs that would come out where it would be like Nirvana Nevermind, but with a string quartet, right? It was just string quartet doing like Smells Like Teen Spirit. Like that is like kind of stupid, I think, but hearing this done in that way, I really wonder. Like, I'm very curious, like how it would translate, because it is a much more natural piece of music to apply to that treatment
for that context.
I really wonder if someone has done that.
Do you guys know the band Punch Brothers?
I've heard of them. Yeah, is that Chris Thiele? Is that him?
It is Chris Thiele.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Knuckle Brothers, who were somebody else. Never mind. Yeah.
So Punch Brothers, an amazing, one of my favorite bands. If you're interested in
I got to see them.
bluegrass.
I got to see them once. Yeah, they're unbelievable. Yeah.
Oh yes,
and you're right. Yeah, they do like crazy covers like this. I totally
right. They're like they're like neoclassical, like contemporary, like bluegrass. It's crazy.
Wow.
They have a cover of Reptilia that they did like at a radio studio. It is the exact same parts.
Wow.
Just instead of it being on 2 guitars, bass and a voice, it is now on bass, fiddle, mandolin, acoustic guitar, and voice. It is the exact same parts. They didn't have to change a single thing about it.
It's making me realize 2 things. One is, oh my gosh, I can't believe that the world is missing this. The string quartet Strokes. But also it makes me realize, like you say, it isn't just sufficient that he wrote the songs using this technique or in this fashion, right? Because like I could make the mistake by taking away from that all I need to do is use this approach to composition, and what I'm going to get as my output is some badass songs and some really great timeless music. Not necessarily.
Probably going to come up with a lot of dumb shit if you tried to do this.
Especially if I did it. Exactly. But
I meant, that's what I meant, specifically you. It would be stupid.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
and by the way, hundreds, if not thousands of bands have done exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. So this is not such a novel approach. It's so then what ends
No,
up
I mean, like, sorry,
being
in the wake of the Strokes,
Oh, right.
so
Oh,
many
after
people
that.
have like tried to be like, I'm
yeah.
going to do it like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I like you have so many bands like they listen to the Strokes and they go and they figure out how to play those songs, but they don't know the actual fundamental like theory, and they haven't like learned, they haven't spent their time, woodshedding, not woodshedding in the club, but woodshedding on paper, writing out arrangements in this style. They don't do that. They just go, okay, those guys play this, right? And they have like, we're gonna have one guitar do this, and then I'm gonna have just the other guitar do this. That's it. I'm writing songs like Julian Casablancas, right? And you're like, no, you're
Yeah,
not.
not quite.
And, that is an ilk that I think, especially, it's funny. It took until the 2010s for that type of like to like really find its way into popular like commercial music. Like, a lot of the other bands that came out of the wake of the Strokes in the 2000s, still damn good. You know what I mean? Like looking at the Killers and Arctic Monkeys and stuff like that. But then, you wait another 10 years and it's like, all right, you guys have the totally wrong idea of what makes these songs great.
I mean, and that's the story as old as time. I mean, we were talking about nu metal, and it's just like suburban kids with, frustrated suburban kids trying to grunge with, they had no reason to grunge. Didn't need to be grunging.
Yeah. It also too, it's not just in note choice, but something else. Something that I really appreciated on this listen through, especially, is note length, which I feel is for all of you, songwriters, composers out there. This is some important stuff. Here, let me bust out this bass. So, by the way, just learning that Julian wrote all of this music was like such a. I was not expecting to learn that, because as a young bass player, I worshipped Nikolai. Man, I was like, that dude. Not only does he like look so cool just standing there and how he plays, but the things that this man has chosen to play in these songs is beyond genius. And I like idolized him and looked up to him. And then, of course, only to later, more recently, learn that he actually didn't write those parts.
Yeah, the things that were chosen for him to play.
Right. But God, I still, though, aspire to play things like how he played them, though. So there's some examples of note length, which is something that I really learned because I played Jamaican music so much, right? So Jamaican music, and especially playing bass in like reggae, for example, the tempo's generally slow, and you've got these like longer notes going on. So one of the pitfalls to fall into is just to have everything become legato, and every note just last and trail into the beginning of the next note, right? And there's a point at which you realize when you're playing reggae bass that the timing of when your note begins is one of the things that's important about your note. And the other thing that is equally important is the timing of when your note ends and how that locks into what the drummer is playing. Right? So, like, for example, in the context of reggae, everything is based around the one drop, right? On the backbeat, on beats 2 and 4. And so a lot of times what you're doing to participate in this rhythmic thing that we're all accomplishing here is that you are ending all of your notes right on that one drop with the drummer. You're not starting your note there. That's when you lift up your finger. And there's so many cool examples of what the bass is doing on Room on Fire, where all it comes down to is note length. Mm. Like, for example, in the song Under Control, okay? So this is one of the one of the examples of a place on this album where what they're playing actually is that more similar to that conventional way that a rock band is set up, where they're all just strumming on the same chord together. Nobody is playing any other counterpoint part. That both guitars and bass are just, they're all just doing this together. And these notes are all connected. So then it goes to the chorus, and what changes? Not very much, actually. The pattern that the drummer is playing changes just a little bit, but the manner in which both guitars are strumming is essentially exactly the same as it was in the bass. Not in the bass. The manner in which the guitars are strumming is exactly the same as it was in the verse. So what gives us this musical change? All of a sudden, the bass, instead of playing and connecting all of his notes, the notes get short. There's just air in between. There's spaces of nothing in between, and it makes your body move differently. It changes the pulse. It changes the way in which you bob to this music, and that's the only thing that changed. And anyway, that's just one of the examples of when he does it. But it's all over this record, where the way that you are swaying and that your head is bobbing and that your body is moving and reacting to this music is being dictated by the length of the bass notes.
And that's that attention to detail that really sets all these things up a notch. When we're talking about, again, Julian Casablancas being in the corner, always composing, always doing this and that. This is that level of meticulousness that is setting them apart. He is figuring out, when are we going to staccato? When are we going to legato? Exactly. When are we going to tenuto? When are we going to palm mute? When are we going to slide on and off, up, down? When are we going to change octaves? We're talking about the bass, his ability to say, no. For the entirety of the song, the bassist, the bass is gonna be basically the octave up, accessing essentially lower guitar range.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, this is a great song, I love this. And then suddenly in the chorus or in some other section, maybe the pre-chorus, it drops down into bass land, and you're just go, whoa, I didn't even realize I was missing that. And that level of attention to detail is what truly sets this stuff apart.
Yeah. Yeah, and none of it is, it's just none of it is left out from the thinking and the planning, there's no, and I don't know, I feel like I'm ending up being a broken record on this show about it, just how much I value that like how little is left to, to the gods to figure out, like, the Tame Impala record was like that we talked about. So much of the music that we've talked about so far on this show is, and I keep telling you guys that I also do value music that is like improvised and where things are played to the heart's whim in that moment. I've yet to prove it to you, but I promise. I do also love music like that.
Brandon, Matty, Brandon's very guilty on this show. I make fun of him a lot for every album he picks is like this opus of just like the most perfectly composed, thought out music ever. And I make fun of him a lot.
Topiaries.
But yeah. Okay, I think we should talk about the production and stuff on this record, because I learned something about this that could have completely changed this album like entirely. And I'm so curious as to like, I would love to just take a peek into the other timeline where this actually happened. But I learned that that Nigel Godrich was originally supposed to produce this record. And Nigel Godrich, for those who don't know, he was like the longtime, or he is the longtime producer for Radiohead. He's kind of basically like an extra appendage of that band. He's very responsible for a lot of their amazing, production choices over the years.
He's the fifth Beatle of Radiohead. Right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He absolutely is. And I guess so. They actually had started work with him on this record for like 2 weeks or something like that. And Godrich said, I'm paraphrasing, but Godrich said basically it was like they mutually agreed to part ways because they were like essentially too similar. Like Godrich is like a control freak, and he was like, I want the band to do this, which was, he actually was pushing them to go in take that different route, go and try a new sound, right? Something different from Is This It? And Julian Casablancas, like we've been talking this whole time, has this whole vision in his head of how he wants the record to be.
Got to have control.
Yeah, he wanted to have control over that. And it just became like they just kind of agreed to disagree, and they had to go their separate ways. But I'm so fascinated in the Nigel Godrich Second Strokes album. Like, what the fuck would that have been? Because Nigel Godrich is the kind of producer where it's not like, you can't necessarily like pin him down like, oh, he has like this one sound he always does, and that's what the Strokes would have sounded like. The Strokes would have sounded like, Kid A or something like that. Like, I don't think so. I don't really know. I can't even like conceive of what it would have been. All I know is like his prior success with such like an awesome guitar heavy band like Radiohead. I'm so curious as to like what that could have been, rather than Is This It Part 2. Maybe not that I wish this was produced by him instead or something like that, but I wish they could have came back and done some kind of collaboration together or something. But
the one thing that it seems to me is that if that had happened, we might have heard like a delay pedal on a Strokes record, So other than that, question marks. I don't know.
My first thought was just that, like, if people thought they were disappointed in this, can you imagine if they did some spaced out, trippy Nigel Godrich thing, and then that was their follow up? That would have actually been disappointing. I think
it would have disappointed me. Room on Fire didn't disappoint me, but I think that might have.
I mean, I think a lot of times you can compare loosely the dynamic between a band and a producer to what happens when you have like a screenplay writer versus like a director or a cinematographer or something like that. And, a lot of times you really need the direction to be very heavy-handed to kind of create some of the vision. And other times you really need, something more personal and up close and tight to basically strictly deliver the essence of the screenplay, of the script. And I think that Nigel is the former. I think he's like one of these like big ambitious guys who wants to achieve these like large visions and like how do I add to this vision of what is here in the screenplay? And that's a great thing to do. I mean, God, the wonders he's done with Radiohead, among others. But sometimes you have an artist, you have a screenplay written by a Julian Casablancas where, no, if you do that, you're going to detract from what makes this screenplay really, really great. What you need to do is translate the essence and emotion of the screenplay to audiences. You don't need to add to it. You need to translate it.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if Nigel Godrich was, down to do that.
Yeah, probably not.
Sort of like in the way that the people talk about like Quentin Tarantino's screenplays, which is like they get altered not at all, right? Like what ends up getting made is literally exactly what he wrote.
Yeah,
right?
like the actors don't really improvise that much, like as far as dialogue goes or whatever. Like they stick to what he wrote, like because as a director as he is the meat of what makes him so great is his ability to write, I think.
I was listening to an interview with Walton Goggins the other day, and he was saying he's like down to the punctuation.
Yeah,
you don't alter anything. You just say it literally how it's written, because sort of in a similar way to how reliable you need to be as the songwriter for the whole band, like Julian Casablancas, right? similar in that way, because each time that you test it, nope, yep, that was the best way. He was right. So, but yeah, no, you're right. Like some producers are, more specialists in terms of teasing out a concept and teasing out and either drawing out or completing and filling in what is missing from a vision. And it's easy to understand half the time when you're creating music, that is exactly what's needed to carry it to be a great end product across the line. But there are some others who specialize in being able to interact with a vision that is complete from the time that it's brought to them, right?
I think it was incredibly brave, actually, for the Strokes to commit like full steam ahead to what they were already doing. Like, I actually think the almost kind of like maybe dogmatic way of looking at like your sophomore record would be like, no, we have to do some bigger thing, and we have to get some big famous name producer, and like we have to go bigger, we have to do this, we have to change, we have to do that.
Take advantage of our success.
Yeah. Right. We have to spend 10 times more money on everything.
It actually is my understanding that the record label, I think they were on RCA, they were the ones who said, you're going to go to Nigel Godrich. They didn't want to.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because they wanted because they were like, man, okay, it's weird. It's like against everything that we know as a record company to have this like grungy, dirty, lo-fi is this it record be as big as it can be. So what is our instinct? Well, we're just going to do everything. We're going to do the same thing we do with every these bands. We're going to take them and we're going to polish them up.
Yep.
Right.
So let's send them to Nigel, right? Yeah. They wanted a more polished, cleaner, brighter, in-your-face Strokes record. So they sent it to Nigel, and it just didn't work out. So they went back to Raphael. But I think that thing is that interesting is that they did get what they wanted. RCA got what they wanted, because when you go and listen like directly Is This It to Room on Fire
sounds better.
It is
way
brighter.
Better.
They're like it's way brighter. It's way more bitey and in your face, like bitey in a good way.
Yeah. The clarity of like all the instrumentation is like so much sharper. Like
the tones are more robust.
It is a hi-fi, lo-fi record.
Yeah.
Ooh,
a hi-fi, lo-fi record is what Room on Fire is. And if you get really into the super down nitty gritty of it, it is really fascinating that they definitely do bring in a higher, utilization of studio production techniques. Like there are things in Room on Fire that don't exist in Is This It? Like you can tell that they have room mics, that they are probably doing 2 microphones on the guitar cabinets instead of just the one, and then the hard left, center, right panning. They're playing more with space and panning, and even like automation. There's a lot of like very subtle automation on the records where like, okay, in the verse, the 2 guitars are hard left and right, like pinned, and then for the chorus they come in just a little bit. They're like 50% on the left, 50% on the right, and there's even parts where you can tell where that they like when they do those structural like terracing where they like pull out the bass and the drums and have it be just the 2 guitars for a moment. You can tell that they are then also playing with using like reverbs and delays in very, very, very subtle ways, and compression, playing around with compression that are like, it's there. And then that meticulousness that was in the compositions, it is actually brought to the arrangements as well, but it's like so committed to kind of this like formalist, minimalist thing of like, it is the instruments and nothing else. And maybe we can play around with some room mics and like a tiny bit of reverb, but we're not doing this like 21st century technology thing.
No, it's not a record. It's not a record that was made like after the fact. It's a record that was made in the room with the band. Like they performed it, right? It's not the kind of record where, the producer is figuring things out and tape loops and all kinds of crazy shit on the back end. It is. Right. We talk about this a lot, Brandon, on the show, which is like there are these records that we love that are just like, they're just a band presented as they are. And it's a lot of times those records can become very timeless. Like when you do that, like to me, this album doesn't sound like dated at all. Like it sounds like it could have been made in the 70s. It sounds like it could have been made, 2 days ago. Like it doesn't.
It completely fooled young Matty for many years, right?
Yeah. And I love seeing it both ways too. Like when they just released the super mix of Revolver a couple years ago, if you guys remember that, I was like, this is fresh. Like an indie band nowadays could have released this stuff that came out in 1966. How insane is that?
Yeah, and it's they intentionally did resist the production technique which was so prevalent at the time, right? Because right here in the early 2000s, this is really the time when Pro Tools and a digital audio workstation became the true industry standard and the way of making music. And what that tended to result in is that the most common way to make music was in a very maximalized way, right? So that each drum hit has actually like many layers to it. 5, 6, 7 sounds that you're actually hearing that get blended together, that get stacked together to ultimately make the sound of this tom drum or this kick drum, and many layers of vocals and all kinds of effects and different versions of them swimming around. Why? Because it was doable finally at this point in time, and because it sounded amazing and it sounded great. There's so many other records that we could be talking about right now that actually do use that maximalist approach, and they've created something like unbelievable and really beautiful with it. But this is an example of people consciously resisting doing that, even though they could, right? Making things in the older way when you used to only be able to have a maximum of 2. I mean, even the fact that with Room on Fire that there's 2 microphones on the guitar, on one guitar instead of 1 microphone on that guitar, that even is like a luxury compared to what the recording technology made available years ago. But the producer that they went back to after not working with Nigel Godrich was Gordon Raphael, who produced Is This It?, produced their first EP. And he's absolutely such an interesting guy. And he's absolutely that second kind of producer that we were talking about, which is a specialist of serving a vision that's already there. Decisions that have already been made. A desire and a clear picture of what this music wants to sound like that has already occurred to somebody before he even arrived. And he says all the times in interviews that like he begins by just asking the question like, okay, so what are we doing? What do we need to do? What do you want to make? Just coming from his own not so happy experiences from when he was a young musician and saving up all this money to go into the recording studio only to have older engineers who felt like they know more than him talk him out of his ideas and the way that he wanted to make music. And so, he just kind of thought, I never want to do that to somebody else. So, let me start by asking you, what is it that you want to make? And let's go from there,
Kind of reminds me of like a Steve Albini almost. Like I always appreciated that about Albini, which was he was an engineer first and foremost. I mean, but I guess like when you think of his work, you kind of still do kind of think of him as a producer, but you think of him that way because of how much he got out of the way, right? Like and a lot of bands, it's like they were all the better for that they had someone like him in the room who allowed the bands to just be who they were and be themselves. I love producers like that. I would like to think if I was in a position like that, that's probably what I would do as well. But there is something to, that other school of thought though, which is just that big, crazy, some producer who can come in and just like radically alter the direction of a band or something like that. It's like, it's crazy, but,
yeah, I mean, you got George Martin in that camp. There's so many This is
Well,
not.
George Martin is really interesting because I brought up the, a translator, when I talked about like translating the screenplay directly. I think George Martin is like a weird combination of what Brandon you were just about to say, and I definitely want to hear what you were going to say. It's a really interesting combination of that kind of like additive, interpretive playing type person, but also just an interpreter. Like he needed the George Martin was the string that tied the air balloon of John Lennon and Paul McCartney with their crazy ideas down to the earth. You know what I mean? And tethered them so that us down here on the earth could be like, oh, that's what they're going on. We needed those strings on I Am the Walrus to kind of get us to understand it and interpret it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And I think that stands out in contrast to these first two Strokes records, because it seems like if the producer and engineer wasn't Gordon Raphael and if it was somebody else, like it seems like as long as whoever it was stayed out of Julian Casablancas' way and the rest of the band and just did what they were asking, we would have gotten the Strokes.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's actually really humorous that you bring this up because, do you know who produced their 2020 album, which was, obviously their first two albums were huge.
I do.
And then the third, fourth, fifth album, contentious. I have to say, I absolutely love Come Down Machine. I think it is super underrated and needs way more, reappraisal.
That's the one that looks like the RCA box, right? Is
exactly.
That
Yep. Oh yeah. I am that album's strongest soldier.
Okay.
Cool. We'll talk
we'll
about
have
that
to bring you back another time to talk about that one.
Yeah, we will.
I would love that. I'd be honored. 2020 considered their biggest album since their first two albums. Some people say it's their best still. Return to form is what everyone's saying.
Right.
Guess who produced this album? Rick Rubin, the guy who's famously known for just sitting there and being like, less, reduce, get it down to its essence, distill that from that wine into that vinegar, or from that beer down to that whiskey, distill down to the essence. And it's funny because that's what they were doing in the beginning.
Right.
Really. You know, Gordon Raphael is kind of this like weird, like Edward Scissorhands, Tim Burton version of Rick Rubin, just being like, what do you guys want to do? Let's just see to the vision that you guys are going to do and just like optimize it.
But yeah, this isn't to say that one style of production is better than the other, right? Because, oh my gosh, some of the most amazing art comes from both ways, right? Just like so many things in life. But because to go back to the Beatles, I don't think that that's the same situation where that, okay, if it wasn't George Martin, you put someone else in those shoes. As long as they just stayed out of John and Paul's way and just did whatever it was that they were ordering, we would have gotten the same product. I do not think that that is the case there, right? Like, the Beatles, their records probably ended up sounding the way that they did because of how often someone did not do what they were asking them to do, right? And got in their way.
3 or 4 famous examples of George Martin saying to John Lennon, that song that you wrote is amazing. Double the tempo and make it a rock song. And George Martin was right every time. And John Lennon did not want to. He threw a fit famously every time, but he went along with it. And boom, that's how we got Help. That's how we got A Hard Day's Night. I think there was another one too. And finally with Revolution, many years later, he wrote that down as like a low tempo or down tempo, like doo-wop song.
I can't stand that version of Revolution too.
Well, that's John Lennon's version, right? Specifically George Martin was just like, no, you need to speed that up. That's a rocker. Yep. And John, at this point, now the Beatles are as huge as they are. John is like, no, you know what? We're famous enough. I've proven myself enough. I want my version. And so then George is like, okay, fine. Let's do my version as a single and your version on the record.
The White Album is worse off for it, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I agree. George Martin was right.
George Martin was absolutely right in that instance. I have a question. I'm curious, Matt, if you could answer this or not. So, like, one of the other hallmarks of this band is that very almost harmonica mic through an amplifier vocal tone of Julian Casablancas. That is something that is like basically a constant on every song on the first album. It's a constant on almost every song on this, or is it every song? Right? It has that basic that like tone to it.
It's less than people think, right? I mean, you
Mm.
guys know this as like recording engineers and producers that like a lot of times, like every time you get in the studio and you're like trying to cut a record, you're like, it needs less distortion than I thought it did.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we'll turn the gain down on that overdrive pedal.
Yeah.
It's a similar situation, right? It's my understanding that when they first started practicing in a garage, not a garage, you know, a garage, something akin to a garage, a rehearsal studio in Midtown.
God, I already know what you're going to say. This is exactly what I theorized. Was what they probably had some shitty amp or something that he would have to sing through or something, right?
And they had a shitty practice guitar amp. I think it was a PV, like 30 water, solid state, of course. And he just hooked up his microphone to that. And so when they're practicing, you know, and practicing. And again, that's the thing about this band is they say like, man, no, they practiced every day.
Wow.
And Julian would tell people, you need to play it like this, not like that. You need to hit those drums harder at this part and softer at that part, yada, yada, yada. They grew very attached, you know, it's demoitis, basically, but to the demo that they were rehearsing. And so then when they go into the studio, they just wanted to recreate that sound. The urban legend is that they did just mic up a PV amp and have him sing through it. That's not the case. He sang into a large diaphragm condenser. I think it was an Audio Technica. And Gordon Raphael in post, using, you know, pushing preamps and using a certain amount of compression and whatnot, to emulate that PV practice amp shit vocal, but Avalon. Like a higher.
He had an Avalon mic.
It was an Avalon?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably,
but that is something else about it that I think is really interesting. Is when you talk about hallmark, elements of a band, people look at Julian Casablancas' nonchalance. Once again, you find out that when you really start to peek behind the curtain, it is not nonchalance at all. Okay, so I actually, like, first and foremost was a vocalist. I took voice lessons for many years. I sang in a lot of choirs. And I sometimes teach voice nowadays. And I'm always trying to keep up to date on the practices and whatnot. Great vocalists, practiced vocalists, what they do is they have to go through and write out their pronunciations and their, placements of throughout the whole song. Like, just like a guitarist has to go and learn the song and practice. I put my hand here for this chord, this voicing's better. I move it here, I move it there, I do this, I do that. Like, they have to practice.
Come up with the best way to finger this sequence of notes.
Exactly.
Or maybe actually it's more achievable if I finger it this way instead. So there's a similar thing that singers need to do.
Right. Yeah. Good. Any singer worth their salt is going to do a similar thing where they're going to go through and they're going to figure out, do we want to sing the word like emphasizing the first part of the vowel, going like, let me turn this on. Like, am I going to emphasize that first part of the vowel? Because we have a thing called a diphthong, right? Do you know what a diphthong is?
Why do I've heard that term. I don't know what it is.
I know this because I am a huge amateur language nerd. It's two vowels blending into each other.
Exactly.
Like EO or UA or something like that.
Multiple vowels in a single syllable, right? And so I just took the word like. Like actually has the two vowel sounds ah and e, and you align them together. Like, right? And so a singer is going to figure out, am I going to sing it emphasizing the first part, like, and I'm going to close it at the end to, enunciate my word, or am I going to emphasize the second half? Like, right?
This is so good.
Or any combination of any of those, like kind of combine it like that. Where am I going to add vibrato? Where am I going to close off? Where am I going to cut off, right? You talked about the importance of cutting off your bass notes.
Yep.
It's similarly important. Where am I going to cut off my vocal, right? Am I going to kind of be like loose and in between the rhythms? Or am I going to be on the grid playing rhythms here and aligning with the groove? When you start to look into this, so point is, great singers are basically going to choreograph their vocal performance and figure out, where am I going to have my vowels. How am I going to pronounce words? Where am I going to vibrato? Where am I going to cut off? Where am I going to place my voice? Right?
Mhm.
Do I want to sing it with like lower, huskier, throatier sound, like, or am I going to be more up here and nasally, like, right? Got to figure out every single element of this. When you go look at live recordings of Julian Casablancas from 2001 to 2002 to 2003, different performances of the same song across multiple years, or even in the same year, multiple, performances, my guy, Julian, is hitting like the exact same articulations. He's taking the time to figure out exactly how to sing his songs exactly the way he wants to. And he's putting in the hard work. He's doing the prep work. And then he's coming on here. And because he's practiced so much, it's at that point, it's muscle memory. He's like an athlete. And so he can kind of have this nonchalant, crooning, whatever attitude to his performance and his showmanship. And he's allowed to get away with that and sound as good as he does because he put in the hard work to actually be extremely meticulous with his vocal performance as well, right? Everyone thinks that he's just like, oh, just get up there and do a lazy vocal. He's anything but lazy. So that's the vocal performance, right? But you specifically asked about the sound of that kind of harmonica microphone filter, right? So he's trying to emulate the practice amp situation like we were talking about, because they just found it really worked for their sound. I mean, you guys know as mixing engineers that adding that little bit of overdrive and saturation is kind of going to help it cut through mix.
Big time.
Adds it to this. So that's definitely an element that helps. But something that a lot of people really get wrong here is the amount of distortion, right? Really, the vocal is saturated. It's not distorted, right?
Right.
And so everyone just thinks you just come in here and you sing everything like this, or like you either do that and you've gone way too far, or you go all the way to the end and you just sing at a normal voice like this without any amount of distortion. And you just crank up the channel strip in your processing after you've recorded, and you just have that do all the work of the distortion. But the truth is, he dances. He dances on the edge of breakup, just like great guitarists will have set their amps and pedals as such that when they're playing a little bit lighter, it has this nice saturated sound. But if they dig in, it kind of just barely goes over the hump there and starts to distort and get that nice edge of breakup sound.
Right.
Yeah,
it straddles the fence between clean and distorted, and rides right in that zone where you're the way that you articulate affects how distorted each moment is.
You can hear it. There is like a threshold that he can push and cross, and it pushes him into oversaturation land. And it does sound like he has some amount of control over that as a vocalist, which is really fascinating too.
100%.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just as simple as he's singing through like a harmonica mic, which would make everything sound like that
across the board. Same amount of distortion on every syllable. Yeah.
There would be like no nuance to it. Whereas this, it is, to my ears, it was basically present on almost every song, but there was like a nuance to it, like you're saying. It's like there is like an amount that he can go into or shy away from as a singer, which is kind of amazing.
Yes, 100%. And there's even like a third dimension to this, right? Like Brandon was saying, you can kind of jump on this side or that side. And you can do that a couple of different ways. You can do that by either just getting louder, and he does do that sometimes, where he'll jump up an octave and get loud, and that'll distort. But it's also the way that the natural vocal distortions he's adding in his performance interact with the compression and the distortion that is being applied in processing after the fact, right? So
just like his nu metal contemporaries, right? Playing around with that tone of pure note and putting in the right.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So
yes,
that all then being played through that distortion effect. So you end up with a more three-dimensional. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's like a
right.
It's like a 1 + 1 = 3 amount of variance that
greater,
you can play with.
Greater than the sum of their parts.
You had me scared in the first half, Brandon. I'm not gonna lie, but
I'm just saying that's a big part of new metal vocalism. That's all I'm saying.
Well, if I can get even deeper into the nerding out of the whole like vocal distortion thing, is so the type of vocal distortion that you just activated very beautifully, by the way, Brandon, is essentially a false fold distortion, where you are basically like squeezing your diaphragm enough to kind of cause your false folds to come together and like rattle.
False folds.
Yeah.
Okay.
False fold distortion. Okay. Right. And that is huge in that like new metal sound, that kind of thing where you can just get it tough, get it really gritty. Julian Casablancas does that sometimes, especially on his higher notes. But something that sets him apart stylistically is he more frequently uses a type of distortion that's called like rattle or buzz or rasp. Which is when you kind of arrange your like vocal organs, your vocal tract in such a way that your palate kind of like rattles, like your soft palate up here kind of rattles. And it's referred to as like rasp or rattle or buzz. And it's something that you really have to work hard to like balance it. It doesn't necessarily, you don't achieve that by like, pushing in healthily with your diaphragm while adding more air like you do a false fold distortion. It's kind of this like balancing act of getting your posturing to sit correctly. It's like a yoga pose. And so like, that's where he gets something like we're talking about Under Control earlier, but it's like, we were young, darling. I was saying that, clean. But you can do, you were young, darling. That's that rasp, that buzz. That's a very different type of distortion than that. If I was to sing that same thing in false fold, it would be, we were young, darling. But he doesn't do that. He goes, you are young, darling.
Wow.
Right? It's a subtle difference.
Wow.
It's, but it makes a huge nuance.
Is the false fold then like you take it or leave it, you take it, like that part? That's false fold then,
exactly.
Right?
Wow.
Yep,
okay.
Exactly.
Wow, man.
When he gets that grungier, harder thing, that's that false fold distortion. But then when it's the softer stuff, like I just sang, or even like, watched her as she wiped her eyes, that kind of stuff on that song was Between Love and Hate. That is that more tender distortion. That's your rasp.
The rasp.
And then he combines the fry as well, which is not really a type of vocal distortion as much as just like it is a vocal distortion, but it's not pitched in the way that these other vocal distortions are.
But it's yet another tool that he is absolutely intentionally using and is not just something that he's freewheeling at all. See,
100%. Exactly.
This rabbit hole goes deep, man.
Oh yeah.
And gosh.
It's fascinating to hear you like hold court on this stuff, Matty, because to me, it's like I easily fell into the misconception. Maybe when I first heard this band, I had a feeling it was more complex than what I had initially assumed. But there's got to be that misconception out there that's all it is. It's this one-dimensional thing. He puts a distortion thing on his voice, or he sings through an amp or something like that, and that's it. But it really is like way more complex than that.
What was that lyric that you said? It's work hard and make it look.
Work hard and say it's easy.
Yeah. Oh my God. I had this. I had the same thought while you were explaining this. It's just like, man, that really does like kind of.
He said it. He told us right in the beginning, as Yeah,
the very first song that they ever put out, right? Mm-hmm. Wow. No, it's so inspiring to me, and again, that dichotomy, because it's so inspiring to me because when these two things, this seemingly casual swagger, the seemingly casual approach, and this absolutely meticulous, no stone unturned approach blend, like they don't end up canceling each other out or something like that. They just, something new and that's like exciting and inspiring comes out of it. You know, maybe it's just because like it's seemingly impossible. Like it seems like you couldn't do that. It seems like you couldn't try hard to be cool and therefore accomplish being cool. It seems impossible, but it's right in front of me. I mean, look, here it is. Like, listen to this record. Like, there it is.
I mean, you mentioned dichotomy before, right? Dichotomy between different bands in the scene. But here we are identifying a dichotomy within this singular band, which was the progenitor of the scene. And I think something else that helps, like, how is this possible? How can it be this meticulous and attention, and detailed and attentive and good and amazing, while also being so cool and like casual and nonchalant? And I do actually think that an element of that is the fact that it was this singular guy writing the songs. It was his job to focus on this, and all the other members of the band, it was their job to play the parts well and then be cool.
Right.
And, they could do that. Like, they could have that cool whatever attitude because they're like, I come to practice and I play and I'm good at it.
Yep.
What are you going to do? He's not the one in his bedroom at night being like, oh my God, do I play an ad 9 or should I do an ad 6?
See, and anyone who has ever at different points in time both played in someone else's band and then gotten your band together on a stage knows the completely different worlds of experience that those two experiences are like. You know, when you're showing up to the show and you're setting up your equipment and you're about to play in your buddy's band or someone else's band that's not it's not your songs, it's not your music. It's so easy. You got the swagger. You're just like, yeah, man, I'm cool. I'm showing up to play my guitar. Look at me. Let's do it. Yep. And then the singer's all nervous. And you're like, what are you so nervous about, man? It's just me. Like, look at all those people are here just to see us. This is cool. Let's do it. But man, when it's your music, when it's your songs,
you're pulling your hair out.
Oh my God. You're like having a full body, mind, spirit, like seizure happen. Oh yeah.
Something about Room on Fire. I realized that we talked a bit about the composition elements and how it kind of comes from that formal theory background. But something that I didn't get a chance to mention is the discrepancy and difference between the way that manifested on the first album versus the way it manifested on the second album.
What's the difference?
And I mean, like the big thing, and this is why we say, Room on Fire is just it's Raichu to it's Pikachu. It's interesting that, I think that those elements of that like SATB-style counterpoint composition are the seams are there. Like you can tell how it was constructed on Is This It. You can see where the dovetail joint is, and you can pull on the article of clothing and see where the seam is and all that stuff, and it's still really good. You're like, I mean, I can see how this was constructed, but it's still really great stuff, obviously. And then Room on Fire is taking that same stuff, but they have refined their process to the point where now the seams are totally hidden. The joints are perfectly finished and sanded over. Like you wouldn't even know that that's how they did it if not for Is This It coming first.
Right.
Honestly. And I'd be happy to even like draw a couple comparisons like with guitar, saying like this is how they did our arpeggios on Is This It versus Room on Fire, right?
Matty, you just put to words what I have been unable to explain to myself for 20 years about why is it that I like Room on Fire more than Is This It? It's what you just said right there. Oh.
Yeah.
This feels so good. I feel such a like weight. Really, I finally get it.
I completely get why you even like this band, Brandon. Like this is so much more of a Brandon band.
Band. Yeah.
It was a Nate. It was a Brandon band nested inside of a seemingly Nate band.
And because all the Brandons out there will understand what I mean. We want to be like Nate's. We admire, we like, God, I want just the swagger. I want to just be like 1, 2, 3, let's go. Yeah,
because
we admire it so much.
My thing is like first and foremost is the Iggy Popness. The effortless, cool, the loose.
Yes.
Let mistakes happen. Let it be sloppy. That's fucking rock and roll. Keith Richards, like Mick Jagger. Like I love that shit. And so it's fun, breaking something like this down, because on paper it seems like that's what this is, but it's actually not at all.
Not at all.
It's not even close to something like that. It is like this really meticulous machine masquerading as not even masquerading is not the right word. It's like somehow a robot becoming as cool as Keith Richards. Like
or like if you
wild.
could sit down and design the chaos of Keith Richards and it is a working facsimile. Like it would pass the Turing test.
It would.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly right. And I think it's interesting that you're drawn, there's a lot of dichotomies there, between even you two, right? And it's interesting. People have their individual sensibilities, and it's like you can always appreciate one versus the other, but people tended to gravitate towards a preference over the other, right? Like, another, I think, you're talking about the Beatles versus the Rolling Stones. You could talk about like the Eagles versus Steely Dan, and all kinds of stuff. I think that in this era, you kind of have the Strokes, and you could say Interpol, but I think it'd be more accurate culturally for the garage rock revival to say you got the Strokes versus Jack White.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
There you go.
Yes. And guess who was my idol as a young teen? It was fucking Jack White. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And like things, I love Jack White. Especially like honestly, like some of his recent albums that he's been doing, I think he's been killing it.
Yeah.
But my home base feels like the Strokes. You know what I mean? If I had to have a comparison between those two, and it's interesting. I think you talked about like Jackson Pollock paintings before, and it makes me think of different types of art. Like, listen, there is a type of art, an approach to art and aesthetic this is a perfectly crafted, beautiful painting where every detail was slaved over, and that's art, and it can be beautiful, and it can really, draw out your emotion and capture some of the human experience.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a perfectly captured, candid photograph can have the same exact effect.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally. Very well said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what musical moments are you gonna show to us now?
Again, I'm a little bit off the cuff here.
You're good.
But I want to make sure if people watching at home that they can see this. So when I think about like drawing the comparison, like look at an arpeggio that you would see on Is This It? Like in Soma, you have just like just pretty standard. We're just going, we have our triad, we have our chord, and we're arpeggiating it, and we're adding just that little bit of like throwing the seventh in there. Pretty standard, pretty normal. Like we're not really doing any string skipping or direction skipping, and the rhythm is very straightforward, right? But then when you look at an example on Room on Fire, let's go to, I talked about this one earlier, Between Love and Hate. Look at this arpeggio. Listen to the rhythms. Look at the voicing. Look at the way, if you can see, like some of the way, like the strings are skipping around and changing directions. Now, instead of that, you have. Right?
It's like an order of magnitude more complex than the one before.
And it's
yet still like, elegant.
Yeah. It's also like 5 or 6 chords long instead of 2.
Yeah.
Huge, right? Yeah. Huge. And I also, the rhythm I want to pay attention to too. Like when you look at just the rhythm of that first one, it's like kind of just straightforward. If you took the accents out of it, it'd be straightforward like that. But then if you look at the rhythm of the second example, and between love and hate, it's there's dynamics added to it, and syncopation,
stresses and unstresses.
Right, exactly. Right. And it's just so good. And I think about this all the time. I think it was Chopin said, elegance is often misnomered as simplicity.
Oh shit!
Wow.
Chopin.
What is honestly though? What does he know though? Like really?
Who knows?
Like, who is
only the best romantic era composer?
Yeah. Who is he to say that? Even?
Can I ask you something, Matty? Since you got your guitar there, this is probably the thing ever since I happened upon your channel. The question that I have wanted to ask you. So much of the songs and the music that Julian writes evokes in the emotional zone, evokes this teenage thing, right? This like I'm standing at the high school dance and like I'm nervous to ask her to dance with me. I think she'll say no. Just this feeling, right?
Honestly, it almost literally in a lot of the lyrics he writes about like how there's that's in there, like in the lyrics as well.
Yeah,
his lyrics are incredibly like narrative and almost dialogue-esque. They're not really poetry. They're very almost like snapshots of life.
But what it is, though, is he gets it, even if it was an instrumental song, right? It just feels like that. It like I feel 16 when I hear that. Okay, so my question is, how does that get accomplished? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough question to answer because the answer would be different for every song you choose. You know what I mean? Like you can show me that chord progression on Whatever Happened, which is the song you just played.
Yep.
And I can say, I can, speculate that this is the reason why this particular set of notes and rhythms makes one feel that way. But then if we go to a different song, like, okay, I get the same feeling from this song, I would say, okay, and I speculate that this is the reason. And those are going to be different reasons. Yeah. It's really interesting. If I really to come down to it, to try to be as simple as possible, I would say, I would probably say structure and sequence.
Structure and sequence. Okay.
Yeah, as in like a musical sequence. A sequence in music is when you have a shape or a contour or a pattern, and you have it in one place, and then you take it and you take that same exact shape or pattern and you play it in a different place.
Oh, okay.
Either relative to your new location, like relative to the scale, or not relative to the scale, just like objectively in space. And I could play an example of that if you want.
Am I correct in saying that in this piece, that would be going from this like minor 2 to major 1 thing, and then doing that same relationship there also. So it's not the same, but the relationship between the first and second and the third and fourth are the same.
Yes.
Like that, right?
Death. You got it.
Okay.
100%.
And so then also, that also then explains the other example that I was going to play,
Yep. Exactly.
So the relationship between number 1 and number 2 is the same as the relationship between number 3 and number 4.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And so that
100%.
is the thing that sort of evokes a particular a feeling
Right.
or emotion.
That evokes a certain feeling. Whether or not that feeling is, being in high school and standing at the dance and boys are going to say yes, that is super subjective. Of course, other people might not. I would say that, to put it in a different way, that like would encapsulate your experience with somebody else's experience of, like, I don't know, like standing in the rain after, something, I don't know. Is it kind of just has this like main character, everything happens for a reason, I'm in a script energy. And the thing is, like, you think that may seem like ridiculous, but the truth is that it's not. Like, math, music is math. Like, it's all proportions and relationships. Like, every note has a physical wavelength to it, which is,
right.
how many times it vibrates per second to generate the pitch it has and the sound it has. And when you superimpose multiple notes on top of each other, those values can have a proportional, a ratio to them.
Yeah.
Mathematically. And your ear actually can recognize those relationships. That's how that you're in a key and where the tonal center is, because your brain understands where those relationships are, those proportions are mathematically. And so it not only does that vertically at one time, like, okay, this sounds consonant and nice versus this sounds dissonant and not good, right? That's in the mathematical proportion vertically at one time. Horizontally across time, you can recognize different relationships across time. And so there's this structure of everything kind of makes sense happening like for a reason, feeling of sequencing music in this way where it's like, wait, this thing reminds me of the thing that happened in the bar prior, kind of makes me feel like I'm in a novel, and that this part of the script is directly related to what happened, this scene is directly related to what happened in the previous scene in a way that just has to make sense, or else what is the purpose of my life?
I'm seeing this all over now, man. And how the fact that it's happening at a different point in time is a necessary part of that effect, right? Like, the fact that they're not happening simultaneously, it's at a different point in time, is part of what makes it what it is. And I'm seeing it all over his stuff, like the bass part in you'll have to remind me what song this is, but
that is once again between that's Meet Me in the Bathroom.
Meet Me in the Bathroom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same shape, later in time, in a different place, in a different
6/5. Yep.
But in a different context, because now we're based around the fourth chord and not the one chord, right? So yeah, man, it's like just those first high school dance chords that I was playing. It's like it really explains like what evokes that emotion. It's because like it's the same thing but different, happening not at the same time, at another time. It like evokes like a feeling of together but separate.
It's
They're
different
separated,
but the same.
Yeah.
But different but
it's
same.
new but familiar.
Right.
Yeah. And that is the thing. I was prepared, I was prepared to like say, like, people ask me this all the time, like, what is the thing about the Strokes? Like, from Sincere the Music Theory guy, like, what of the music theory of the Stroke guy, what's the deal? Like, everyone's like, is it the secret sauce chord progression? I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's like a thing that people talk about. Oh yeah, it's the Julian Casablancas secret sauce chord progression. And like nowadays people, and it's like, he only did that in a couple of songs. If you really want to get down to it, the Strokes magic. And again, it's easier said than done, because like we said before, it's not just a matter of doing it. It has to be done in a good way,
right.
or else, like, what's the difference between Chopin or just some random pianist?
Right.
It is structure, sequences, and ostinatos.
Okay.
Do you know what an ostinato is?
We're
No,
both waiting for you to tell us.
Yeah. I when I was in 8th grade, I was in a band called Ostinato, but I don't know what it is.
Nice. Okay. Well, let me go down through the list. So we just talked about what a sequence is. And the cool thing about it is he does it all over the place, not only just in the accompaniments, and the arrangements of the music, he does it with his vocals a lot too. Like one of the big ones, or my first example is in 1251, the vocal is a sequence, right? So you take these 3 notes. There's like basically your first note, second note, third note. And they are 3 consecutive notes in a scale, right? And you just say, okay, let me pick a pattern. High, low, high, mid, low. High, low, mid, low, high, mid, low. In a certain, rhythm. High, low, high, mid, low.
Okay.
That's your pattern. Now we're going to do that exact same thing, but just pick 3 different notes consecutive in a scale. Now instead of these 3 notes, let's pick these 3 notes. And we'll do the exact same thing. High, low, high, mid, low.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he does it everywhere.
So it turns out that this song is also a sequence, right? Does that not have that feeling, that element of like, wow, even the melody makes me feel like I'm the main character, right?
Yeah, that deserves a dub clap.
Yeah, we're giving you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Wow.
Then you have structure, right?
Okay.
And the structure is that he's just slightly creative. Not even like getting super out there and alternative and experimental, just like messing with things just a little bit, right? Like rather than everything being a 4-bar phrase where you repeat the chords, sometimes you have a 5-bar phrase, a 6-bar phrase. Sometimes the chords don't happen perfectly symmetrically, right? Like you brought up Under Control before.
Yeah, yep.
And something that I think is so good about that song is like you're saying everything is playing together in this like really regimented way. And so how do you make that not boring is, well, first of all, you play it with, your bravado that they do.
Yep.
And you have a really good melody on top of it. But he also offsets where the harmonic changes are. Like based off of the rhythm, you think that it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and right, something like that. Very simple, but he doesn't do that. He's going 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. Right, like he's changing the structure of where we're changing our bar line and, playing that against the snare, the backbeat. So it feels it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, walking up the scale and then back down. But he just says, what if I just move this here and that there? Bam. Now 1, 2, 3, 4 is beautiful.
Man.
Wow. Very fascinating.
Yeah.
He's really, he's like leaning on 3 or 4 like kind of musical staples, and those become like the spine of the magic trick he's pulling off as a songwriter.
Right, exactly.
Wow, that's very fascinating.
And then ostinato. I forgot to mention ostinato. I forgot to explain ostinato.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes.
Ostinato is when you have a repeated musical phrase. It's just that simple. But the interesting thing about it is normally when you're composing, you take a look at what the underlying harmony at any given point is, and that is the basis of what vocabulary you can use contextually in those places. So if I'm playing an E major chord at a time, I'm probably not just going to come out of nowhere and play notes completely unrelated to E major.
Okay.
However, something that's really cool about ostinato, you're like, how does that it's just, you're just repeating a musical phrase? That doesn't sound interesting. Something that composers do is when they use ostinato, they repeat something so you get used to it, and then they start to change the background around that ostinato, right. And it basically gives you access to new textures and relationships that normally you wouldn't be able to just throw out there. It's like you have to take them on the journey there. And for some reason, I'm struggling to come up with an example. I know that they're out there. An example of an ostinato in Room on Fire. They're in there. I know they are. But off the top of my head, I can say a really easy one is.
Yeah.
This is just doing this and changing the chords underneath it. That's your ostinato right there. You're just going to repeat that. Take it or leave it and take it. But I'm going to change the chords as I'm doing that. What can I say? Just take it or leave it and take it or leave it and take it or leave it. Whatever, you get the point.
Yeah, because each, that ostinato, that ba-did-it, means something else relationally different for each one of those chords.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I specifically, actually, I have one of my biggest pieces of short form content I ever did was Why Is Everyone Saying As It Was by Harry Styles sounds like a stroke song. And I had multiple points in there, but one of those points was the way that song goes. It's like as it was, as it was, as it was, like. Mm-hmm. That is like an ostinato with changing chords underneath it. The Strokes didn't invent that. No. But they certainly use it a lot to the point when, if that's your only, touchstone to this, music theory concept, this composition technique, I shouldn't say a theory concept, a composition technique, then it makes you think of the Strokes.
Yeah, right. It becomes associated with them, a part of an integral part of the way that we know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
I thought of an ostinato on Room on Fire.
Oh, sweet.
It's in You Talk Way Too Much. It's like, give me some time, I just need a little time.
There you go.
Give me some time. He's just singing that over and over while the chords are changing underneath him.
I was so not expecting to walk away from this conversation with thinking that Julian Casablancas, of all the guys in this band, is like the genius of the band. In my mind, I always assumed it was Albert Hammond Jr. because he's the next kind of most famous name in the band, I think, and he plays guitar. And I've always just assumed it was he's this nerd who's figuring everything out, and Julian Casablancas just gets to be the cool guy. That's honestly what I've thought until today.
That is how it seems when you judge. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, 'cause I absolutely did it for decades too. But that's the way that it seems upon judging this book by its cover. That's what you just look at the way that he behaves and the aura that he puts off. It's there's no way this.
Yeah,
he's
that's
a
what
pretty
he
boy.
wants. That's what he wants you to take away. He doesn't want to seem like a tryhard. He doesn't want to seem this way. But this is the way he is. He doesn't want to be perceived the way that he actually is. We're strange.
He doesn't want to be perceived at all.
You're right. You're right. Exactly. Exactly.
He wants his art to be perceived. He does not want himself to be perceived.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that's an interesting thing, which is something that I can see. I told you, Matty, that I spent a lot of years as a monitor engineer, and so I've gotten to be in rehearsal and behind the scenes with a lot of different artists, a lot of people who are extremely famous, and it's just something that you can see that their persona is chosen, it is crafted, it is a part of the artistic piece, and even if that choice is I'm going to try to make it be as true to the way that I actually grew up and the person that I actually am, even if that is what you're trying to do, you have no choice but to craft how am I going to present that, So it's just it seems like when I watched that documentary, it seems like these guys were anticipating that, okay, I'm going to make my music and that'll be my artistic piece and I'll put it forward and people will won't come any further than that in terms of trying to consume this artistic piece. But they're sort of like, didn't expect that it's actually way more comprehensive than that. It actually comes down to how do you talk? How do you stand? How do you look? What do you do in your free time? How do you seem? It's inescapable, whether you like it or not. It's not a question of if that will be part of your artistic piece. It's what will that be, since it is going to be a part of your artistic piece,
Do you guys have any particular standout songs? I don't have any like profound choices. I was always like very fond and attached to all the singles from this record. Like Reptilia in particular is amazing. 1251 is amazing. On this listen through, definitely Meet Me in the Bathroom stood out to me as probably my new favorite from this record. And I Can't Win, the last song. I really, really love that song actually. But I don't have any that I don't like. This album to me slaps all the way through, 1 through 11, every song. I love this record. But what about you guys?
Yeah, I'd say so. For me, my favorite song on this album is "Whatever Happened," the first song. I'm such a fan of that song. Something that is so incredible about it. It leads off the album. When you look at the structure of that song, it is so fascinating. See, normally a song, the normal way to structure one is you make an intro, and then it goes into a verse, and then you go into a little chorus thing, and then you come back to a verse or something, or you go back to the intro or something like that. This one, the song starts and it goes through like 6 sections, one right after the other. 8 sections, if you're counting transitions, like 8 musical ideas before it ever comes back around to another one that it's already played in a row without looping back. The first time that a section of music is repeated in that song is 1 minute and 44 seconds into it, which is almost 2/3 of the way through the song by the first time that they've played a section again. Yeah. And from that point on, it's a symmetrical, like a mountaintop. It goes.
I was literally gonna do
B,
this exactly.
C, B, A, right? It's fucking genius. And then the song after that, Reptilia, is like there's such contrast because the majority of Reptilia is it's one thing that they're all playing, and the variance between the sections is just like muting and unmuting different parts. You stop, you start. No, okay, now you stop, now you start. And they're playing. The majority of the song is it's like the exact opposite of that kind of variety. It's achieving variety in the opposite way. Yep. Right? One song into the other.
And that's that
amazing.
Structure. I was saying like one of their big secret sauces of those 3 things I said is structure. And that works on that micro level that we looked at before in terms of like how you're structuring the rhythms of this harmonic progression. But it's also exactly what you're saying. How are you going to structure on the macro level? Of like, am I gonna go verse pre-chorus, chorus, verse pre-chorus, chorus? No, I'm not. I'm gonna go A, B, C, D, C, B, A, or I'm gonna go A. But guess what? Every time I do A, it's gonna be different.
It's gonna be different, right? Yeah, and you won't even notice unless you're inspecting. You won't even notice that A is A is A is A. It's gonna feel like A,
you
B,
don't even
C, D.
notice. Right. Until you're like, all right, my band is gonna play this song to cover,
right? And
then you go and you're like.
It's just one thing.
It's
the whole
turtles
time.
all the way down. What the hell?
Turtles all the way down. Exactly. So my 3, I love every song is Whatever Happened. I love Automatic Stop. I love Under Control. And I do have to say that the first non-overly positive thing that anyone has said in this whole thing, honestly, like it's sort of like after. I cannot look away from what is happening on this album up until like the last 3 songs, and then it sort of I just kind of find myself losing interest with the
What,
last three songs.
the last three you don't
Every
like?
time.
Really?
It might just be something about the song the way it is.
I knew you were going to say
In
exactly
particular,
that. I don't know why I picked
you knew I was going to say that.
Yeah, that's what everyone says is like the weak song on the album. And the thing is, I have to agree. I do think it's the weak song on the album. However, I still think it's a really great song, honestly.
I do too.
And I think something about it that might suck the air out of it is actually that it is clearly kind of like mastered in a different way. Like it kind of actually has this lo-fi filter over where they definitely like duck some of the lows and some of the highs that it kind of sounds a little more filtered than every other track on the record. And if I had to try to like speculate as to why they did it, it might be that they felt like, okay, we gotta have some sort of difference in this. I mean, for what it's worth, this whole album could have been just literally the whole album is 5 dudes on a stage with the exact same amps and pedals, and maybe they're turning a boost pedal on and off between sections, but like other than that, it is the exact same thing. It's parts, arrangement, composition, all the way through. That perhaps they feared that it was getting a little bit tired by that 80% 3/4 mark, and so we got to do something a little bit different, and so they changed the production, particularly it seems like mostly just like the mix bus EQ or like the master a little bit. I kind of like it stylistically because I think it kind of almost feels like a Polaroid picture, in relation to the rest of the album being more just kind of like widescreen Technicolor or whatever. This one feels like a Polaroid picture kind of washed out. And I think that's fun, but I do agree with you that it's the weak part on the album.
Okay. And what are your standout songs or favorite songs on this one, Matty?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I do think the whole thing is bangers all the way through. Well, I'm gonna say that I gotta agree with Nate here. Meet Me in the Bathroom, I think, is like an understated masterpiece of songwriting and production, or but as a record, honestly. Not production. I mean, a production, a record. An understated masterpiece of a song and a record.
Yeah. For me, coming to this for the first time in a long time, that one was like major standout, like just in every category, like playing, production, and just pure like ear candy, like just as a song, like just so catchy. Just such a fun song.
That song really, really is a good example of achieving like cohesion amongst seemingly disparate parts, like the verse here, the chorus, that like the different sections really feel like they come from different universes musically, and they do, and that is even part of the payoff. And that is like one of the ingredients to the sauce that is good. But like there's just that like je ne sais quoi that I don't know how it works, but it does, where they are so natural. They do still belong together,
I have a fun hot take about whatever happened, Brandon.
Let's do it. Yeah, we haven't argued about anything. Let's argue. Come on. No, I'm just joking.
Well, it's hardly a hot take. It's more just like a hot speculation. Again, is that I think whatever happened is absolutely awesome. It is definitely like such a bold and ballsy opener to an album, and I think it might be one of the most. It might be my favorite like sophomore album opener of all time. And I think we know that this album is Julian Casablancas coming in. We know we can get the feeling that this is him coming in and being like, I'm gonna prove myself. You guys thought this was a flash in a pan and a fluke. No, I know what I'm doing.
Such a good point.
And I'm mad that you all think that I don't know what I'm doing, because I specifically put an effort to make it seem like I didn't know what I'm doing. So you all perceived me in such a way, but now I'm mad because I didn't get my credits as a writer that I thought I deserved, because you all thought it was just a bunch of dudes, just kind of fucking around in a room, and it was so much more than that.
Yeah, just because you don't get it.
Yes.
You don't.
Yeah,
You actually
exactly.
don't understand what I'm
You
doing.
forced me to do this. What I'm about to do, this is going to hurt
Right.
you more than it's. No, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. What I'm about to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, the joke is like, oh, what do you guys call the strokes? Because of you're all doing downstrokes, right? Like that's the thing. There, so many of the songs are just downstrokes, downstrokes, downstrokes. On the first album in particular, so much of it is just doing that downstroke thing. He's just kind of like, you know what? Fuck you guys. Middle finger. The opening of the second album is just going to go right into just some
Down, up, down,
some
up, down,
alternate picking. Like, I just think that was like him secretly middle fingering all his critics at the opening of the second album.
I never thought that's so funny, man. Okay, so you said this is your you haven't found corroboration for this. This is your personal theory.
Yes.
Oh man, you have
totally
to be right.
Personal theory.
Yeah, I believe it.
I agree.
And the fact that, like you said, and then from there, that same song has an absolutely bizarro song structure. It is not, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. It is like A, B, C, D, D prime guitar solo, C, B. Like, it's so weird.
Wow. Yeah, it's just next section, past the halfway point of the, like we're closer to the end of the song than we are to the beginning of it, and still next section. Oh my gosh, it's amazing, and not like in some kind of, like Rush, Chicago, like fucking crazy prog way, not
It's
in
not
some kind
proggy
of
at
rock
all.
opera way, in such a small scale, humble. This is a guitar band song,
and then the like effect of that, the like effect of that too is it like it's almost like it like sets up Reptilia in such a satisfying way because Reptilia is like such a song and it's something they're like so well known for and it's like such a banger too. Like
also another little just plopping the dong on the table. Both of the first two songs, right? The first one starts with okay on what note?
Yep.
B. Okay.
Yep.
Here comes the second song. Ready? What note? The same note.
That's so funny.
Yep.
The same exact note. The only thing that's different is the tempo.
Yeah.
And that's sick. Like,
get out of here. How do you get away with that?
Like drum opening fill. Yeah. And also there's the lyric in Whatever Happened To where he goes, I want to be forgotten. He's just right. I hate you all for making me famous. Yep. I hate you all for perceiving me. I'm going to come in here and tell you that I wish that you all forgot I existed, while also writing this song specifically to substantiate my existence and my fame. It's like, wait, what?
Dude, and I'm just realizing, because I've only ever read the lyrics to Whatever Happened in the context of a romantic relationship, but yeah, him talking to the audience, when he says,
top 10 ideas for countdown shows. Whose culture is this? Does anybody know?
Okay. See, there you go.
Yep.
Oh yeah, please don't make this harder. No, I won't yet. Man, you guys.
Wow.
Could we possibly have arrived at the conclusion that this is a good album?
I think so.
What do you think?
Yeah.
This is a pretty good album.
Pretty good.
Brandon and I have this extremely redundant question we ask at the end of these podcasts, which is, Matty Gregg, would you recommend The Strokes' Room on Fire?
Yes.
Awesome. I also would recommend this album. I'm on the fence still. Because I didn't get to listen to Is This It? I didn't get to listen to it at all, actually, for this. I only listened to Room on Fire for this. But I'm way, way more familiar with that one than this one.
Yeah, you've heard that one enough
a
for
million
a lifetime.
times.
Yeah,
I've heard
memorized.
it a bajillion times. Yeah. So it was way more fun. I'm actually so glad you guys decided on this one because this was way more of a fun deep dive. And I have kind of come to agree that this is kind of the
kind of better.
It's kind of better. It is kind of better, but I'm still on I can't say that decisively until I need to go back and listen to Is This It some more. But how about you, Brandon?
I would recommend it. Yes. And last thing, but before we go, I want to just read. There's this great quote from producer Gordon Raphael. He says, "For me, music and art and writing and film is showing some of the best examples of what humans are capable of. We get a lot of attention on humans' idiocy and their wastefulness and their inability to get along. But if you watch a band playing together, it's kind of like they're representing the best of what humans are capable of." That's Gordon Raphael. That's the guy who made this album. That's, that's this band, what great music made by them and by others and, by anybody who makes it, what it gives to us. Look at us here. These three guys, this is the first time that we've ever hung out together on different sides of the country. It's a beautiful thing. So, Matty, I'm so glad that you were here with us today. Thank you for making
Thank you so much for having me.
Sharing your knowledge and your insight and your wisdom with all of our listeners. Thanks for being an example of that, the people coming together rather than the yet another example of separateness. So, thank you.
Yeah, truly.
Thank you so much for having me.
So insightful. Seriously, such a treat to have you here and to have you, really enhance kind of the aspects of our show that we try to bring, but to have someone like you who's so articulate and so knowledgeable. It really,
thanks for doing it better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, maybe we should switch places. How about I'll come back and I'll do a non-Strokes related album, and I'll be the one that's
love
like, wow.
that. I would love that. Actually, that would be awesome.
I would love to come back at any point. Doesn't have to have anything to do with the Strokes. Thank you so much for having me on. It was so fun, a true treat to be able to get into some really deep dive discussion with some equally knowledgeable and passionate people.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
You'll be back many, many, many times.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Matty, where can people find you? Where's your give us your links?
So I go by Matty Greg Music on everything. Main platform is YouTube. I do put out some music under just Matty Greg, Matty space GREG. You can find it on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music.
All right. I think with that, Matty, thank you so much again. We really appreciate your time. So this has been Playback, The Strokes' Room on Fire. What a fun episode. Brandon and I are going to proceed to the Patreon zone and do a little bonus episode. So if you'd like to check that out, go to patreon.com/blackmarketdub. That's where you can find ad-free episodes of this episode, as well as bonus episodes and like a little blog we've been doing over there. That's been very fun. We're also a band, Brandon and I. We are known as Black Market Dub, primarily on Bandcamp, also on Spotify and Tidal, all the other places you can get your music. All the music featured in this episode is Brandon and I. It is fun stuff, and there's a bunch more over on Bandcamp. You can go check out all kinds of crazy stuff over there. And with that, Brandon, do you have any parting words, or did we run through all of our quotes?
No, I do. I saved some just for the end.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. We love you. And remember, I don't want to change the world. I just want to watch it go by. Goodbye.
Goodbye.